Okay, that just unmuted me.
We can start on time because Trustee Miller and Trustee Rogan will not be here. So as soon as the Mayor Pro Tem gets online, we'll start. And you can take it away, Tracy. Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here of a map. You guys see this map here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so the reason why we wanted to do a workshop tonight is that we did receive bids for the Safe Routes to School project. So the project is funded by CDOT. Initially, we had $125,000 match. So CDOT donated or awarded $500,000, and then we got $125,000 match. CDBG stepped up. They had some additional turn back money from disaster recovery, and they put in $530,000 towards this project. And then CDOT said, okay, basically you don't have a match anymore since you're bringing this other $500,000 to the table. Now, and we've already contracted out design, the bridge fabrication. There were some environmental items we had to meet that we've already paid for. And so then initially we had designed this project to have a crusher fine trail that goes from Bone Park, and then install fabrication install of the pedestrian bridge. And then we went ahead and designed for improvements to sidewalks on both the east and the west side of 4th Avenue on the north side of the bridge. Once we started looking at the opinion of costs and the other costs that we had already allocated, we realized that we were going to be over budget. So we put in, so in the bid schedule, the base bid included the crusher fine trail, the pedestrian bridge, and improvements to the west side of 4th Avenue. And then we had a bid alternate for improvements to the east side of 4th Avenue. So those bids have come in and they're pretty close to the opinion of cost, but we're still at a shortfall on the base bid of over $200,000. So we have made some recommendations. We have some ideas of how we can fund the base bid. Those recommendations, those suggestions, we're open to any suggestions, are to either use the town set aside funds that we've been setting aside for the last 3 or 4 years to go towards any ineligible flood recovery costs or any clawback from any audits for any of the grants that we've had over for flood recovery. So that's kind of the easiest kind of set aside that we feel like that we could use to fund the shortfall, with the caveat that we do want to look at other funding sources to replenish that. We think there's options right now. Our PAT projects came in. We have more than enough funding for the FEMA pilot projects that we have finished up. But we need to check with the state and see how those funds can be utilized. There may be some sales tax money coming in that we could use to supplement the base bid. So there's a lot of different options we want to look at. But the easiest to go ahead and award this contract tonight would be to use that set aside money that we've been for flood recovery, and then look at replenishing that. There is a bit of an urgency to get this contract awarded for 2 reasons. One, the CDBG funding runs out at the end of March. So that means we have to have all expenditures turned in by the end of February. If we don't utilize those funds, then we will have even a bigger shortfall for this project. The other time constraint we have is to get in the stream, build the abutments for the Ped Bridge before spring runoff. So we would like the contractor to be out of the stream by the end of March. So the purpose of this meeting tonight, or the workshop, is to get guidance and approval from the board to award the base contract for this project and utilize town set-aside funds or any other means that they direct to at least complete the base bid of this project. We are aware that there is a concern and a need for improvements on the east side, and that is a bid alternate. Right now, the bid alternate is $121,000 additional dollars. That bid alternate includes concrete or sidewalk from Bone Park on the south side of the bridge, and then continuing from the north side all the way up to the school. We do have some opportunities here where we could reduce scope and just leave this as pressure fine, and that could reduce the scope over here and the cost on this east side. There's quite a few things that can be done over here, I think, to reduce that cost. But I would like to reiterate, I think the important thing tonight is to focus on the base bid and then come back and look at options for the east side, if the board deems that the priority as well. But if we do not complete the Safe Route to School project as funded through CDOT, we have to make this connection. We would lose that funding. And then again, the CDBG funding ends at the end of March, so we have to have everything expended by the end of February to capitalize on that funding as well. So I think that's all of it in a nutshell. I'm sure there's lots of questions. So please
Are there any
ask away.
questions? Are there any questions for Tracy?
Yeah, I have one, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Tracy, maybe my hearing's not so good anymore, but I'm trying to figure out those dollar figures that you mentioned at the beginning. You said there was a $500K CDOT grant that required a $125K match. Then you also said there was a CDBG $530K, but then you said something about that. I mean, are we going to be receiving $1,030,000 in grants still?
Yes, we have that. We have $1,039,925 in grant and funding. And the expenses that we have, some are actual costs and some are estimated. We're at 1.2 million.
So that the 1.2 million includes the bridge fabrication that's being done,
Yes.
and what else?
So the 1.2 includes design. There was some environmental clearing we had to do for the Preble's Mouse. That was over $10,000 that we had to do. We had to clear some vegetation over on the stream bank to keep the Prebbles from nesting there. So that was a requirement of the environmental clearance that we got. The bridge fabrication was just under $140,000. And then I estimated a construction manager, which will be needed because this is a Davis-Bacon. This has Davis-Bacon requirements, so you have to do interviews and certify payroll. And the construction manager will be doing materials testing of all the material that's going out there. So that's about almost 60,000. We're going to have some utility locates. And then I put in a little bit of contingency. And then there's construction of 784,000.
So you're saying there's a shortfall of 200K.
Just for the base bid, yes. So that does not include
The base bid includes the bridge.
Yes.
And the west side sidewalk.
Yes.
And that pathway that I see going from the bridge to Bone Park, right?
As Crusher Fine Trail, yes.
Okay. So the total package then is going to be somewhere around 1,339,000 by your estimate.
Yeah, I'm about at 1,250,000.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? I can't see everybody, so if somebody wants to speak, go ahead.
Yeah, Tracy, could I ask about the bids? I think your memo said there were 5 bids. Is the one that's being recommended, is it the low bid or?
So one bid did come in lower, but they had 4 bid items missing on their bid schedule. So we had to go to the next lowest bid.
So, I mean, the staff did the normal scoring of the bids and comparing, and this is the one that's recommended.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, this is the lowest responsible bidder.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess those are all my questions at this time. If we're going to do like a comment thing, although we're not voting here, obviously, I could. I guess I should inform the board too that the PRC, Parks and Recreation Commission, just concluded this afternoon a special call meeting because they had talked about this project at their regular meeting on January, whatever it was, 13th, I think. But nobody knew at that time that the contract might be up for bid this quick. I'm up for award this quick. So once it got set for a workshop and the numbers were available, they called a special meeting this afternoon and discussed like general support for using parks funds if necessary to get this project done, but they didn't do a specific recommendation at this time because there are a number of unknown factors of like Tracy said, where sales taxes will come in. Another possibility that we may discuss at the meeting or could discuss now is that unspent funds from the general fund and potentially, I guess, the Parks Fund as well for 2021. Once the amount of those is determined, that are there excess funds remaining that weren't that were allocated but not spent? Those could be reallocated to this project or reallocated to reimburse the flood clawback set aside and that type of thing. So basically, the Parks Commission said it's kind of too early for us to make a specific recommendation, but they basically put primary importance on completing the base part of it, getting the trail and bridge in, and they do express support for an east side sidewalk, but they don't have a specific recommendation to make it this time, other than to say that down the road they would like to take a look at possibly using parks funds to assist with that if the town decides to go forward with it. So I would throw that in the mix.
Any further comments? Questions?
I do want to add from that Parks and Rec Commission meeting, they did say they would like to make a recommendation within the next 30 days. And they are requesting that I set up a site walk with them and any board members that would like to attend in the first week of January to look at that east side.
What is your most optimal timeline, Tracy?
Our optimal timeline is to get this awarded and get the contractor mobilized at the beginning of the year, because then we can have CDBG cover a lot of those mobilization costs. And just keep moving forward with the base as we circle. And then if we want to circle back on this east side early next year and look at options there to get the cost down and funding sources, I think we could do that. But in the meantime, the contractor can get started on the bridge abutments and get mobilized and get that work going early to mid-January.
Okay. Could we have our screen back so I can see everybody?
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor?
Mayor, just quickly, I'm sure everyone's already thinking about this, but if there is a site walk, first week of January, so be sure that if there's more than 2 of either board, we'll need to notice that.
Yes. What I was going to ask you, Counselor, and the reason I wanted the screen back on is what action does this take once it comes before the Board of Trustees, other than a workshop?
I think just direction to staff. I guess what is the idea of the board? What's the action item the board is considering taking? I guess the important question 1, and then if whether it involves a new contract, that'll take obviously a resolution. If it's just adjusting the funding sources, that may require a resolution with a supplemental budget resolution. But
Okay.
it may just be the case that it requires direction from the board. It depends on what the recommendation is.
Okay, but I was under the impression that we don't make decisions at workshops.
We do not.
So that's what I'm asking you. Do we discuss this formally at the next board meeting?
Probably a discussion item. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
I have one, Mayor.
Hold on, Trustee Carovas.
Oh, sorry.
Tracy, what in your document or your cover letter to us down about different options, you have the FEMA PAP money, and I've lost track of where we are with the PAP money. You indicate there's surplus monies there. Do you have an amount of what kind of surplus money is in that fund?
Yeah, we're at like $500,000 plus.
Did you say plus?
Yes.
Okay.
So I need to meet with the new finance director with Cassie to go over this funding to make sure she agrees with what I have on paper. And then we need to talk with the State Department of Homeland Security and ask them if we can utilize these funds elsewhere. Or they may require us to use it to pay for their match for FEMA. Or they may say that it cannot. They might have to give us direction on how we can utilize those funds. I have a meeting with the finance director on Tuesday. And then after that, we do have a meeting with the state on the same day to see how those funds can be utilized. So it's not FEMA money, it's supplemental money that we receive from other funding sources that put us in this positive. And the reason we ended up in this positive is because the insurance money, it's hard to explain, but you had to estimate how much insurance money you're gonna get. And that reduces your FEMA dollars. And so it was just always kind of a game, but a just constant adjustment of trying to figure out where we were funding wise. But we do.
That part I understand. I just want to know how much money was there, if I've lost track in our different meetings over the last couple of years. And secondly, the alt bid, you said for the concrete on the east side is for concreting also on the south side of the bridge, correct? The crusher fine path?
Yeah, that bid all included making that crusher fine path concrete as well.
Okay. We might want to consider looking at an alt bid of just the concrete on the east side, on the north side of the bridge only, because obviously that'll be a lot less than $120,000.
Exactly. So that's one of the considerations we can make is just cutting scope, where we leave that crusher fine, and that'll probably take about 40,000 off the price. So you're still down to maybe 80,000. Maybe we don't do the full section from Evans up to High Street. Maybe we just do a block or two. So there's a lot of options, I think, on the east side that we could take a look at, for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Pro Tem, you had questions?
Yeah. I see that Planner Strom is on here. And I have a question, and this came up at the PRC meeting, and we've got, I know in the works with an application filed, there's for a new hotel. And one of the things the PRC brought up is that hotel would be on one block on the east side. And we're not supposed to get into the details of the hotel yet. And I don't know the details of the hotel yet because I'm doing what we're supposed to do and not looking at any of the things that have been circulated about it. But my question is about the timetable of it, because I mean, obviously, before we would consider adding a sidewalk all the way up the east side north of the river, we kind of want to have some idea of, is there going to be a new building next to that one block or not? Because that block's kind of a problematic block. It goes uphill more than the rest of them. It's got kind of a step down now that's kind of a dangerous place to walk up. So anyway, that's one of the many unknown factors that enter into this, is what's going to happen on that particular block. I guess it's between what, Broadway and Main on that so when do we anticipate that project, the potential hotel project, might reach the Board of Trustees so that we'll know something about it? Because it's really hard to make a decision on something on the east side when you don't know what might be going there, what they propose to do.
Go
Sure.
ahead, sir.
For timing on that, they had submitted a partial application previously. We had comments, we've met with their whole team, and on last Friday, they submitted a new submission for their application that should have all the details in it. I haven't had the opportunity to go through it all yet. Assuming that's complete, we would need to get referrals out and schedule PCDC. I would guess roughly the Board of Trustees would be seeing that in February, assuming we have all the documents we need to have a complete package to bring to you to see that.
Okay, so it is anticipated that it will come before this current Board of Trustees, because the Board of Trustees changes in April, but it's anticipated this board will be the ones to look at that. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
All right.
Any further questions, statements? Well, I recognize that this is one of the most important projects for the Board of Trustees to complete. It will reconnect the town again. It will give access from downtown to the parks, and a walking trail, and vice versa. It will complete the loop. And I just want to reiterate that there are also possibilities, and I discussed these with Tracy Sanders this afternoon, and we'll be discussing these possibilities further with Administrator Simonson when she gets back to town, that perhaps there will be a donation of materials from a reliable source that will enable the town to at least do partial east side sidewalks. I want everybody in the public to know, and even the Board of Trustees, that like I said, this is a really important project. I think it's important to have sidewalks on both sides of the street, and that's what we're going to be working on very strenuously, put it that way, to get accomplished. We'll have the engineers involved in the discussion, but I think that we can get it done and hopefully save some money and do the project even better than we imagined. Anything else? Tracy?
I do have a question regarding the east side. Like I said, I think it's most of the goal for this workshop was to give the board as much information as possible about this project so that we can move forward with awarding the base bid. However, when it comes to the east side, I think there's a lot of different options and opportunity. I don't know if that's something the board wants us to come back to them in another workshop with to discuss those, or can staff take a look and make a recommendation? Does the board want input, I guess, on the east side scope?
I mean, I think, but personally, I think the board should have input on every decision regarding this project. That's how important it is. I don't think it's going to be a difficult decision. I hope that the contribution comes forward, and I'm looking forward to it, to be perfectly honest with you. I understand the purpose of this meeting was to approve the base bid, or at least discuss the base bid and have it brought forward for discussion and possibly a resolution on a future agenda. And I agree that that's the direction we should go. Mark?
Yeah, I would agree too that, yes, the board would like input on the scope. I mean, one obvious thing has already been stated, to keep the crusher fine on the south side and look at the concrete on the north side. The hotel's another complicating another factor. That, you know, the idea of actually walking the east side there with some properly noticed combined meeting of the PRC and the board's probably a good idea. A lot of times, you know, seeing something when you're actually physically present can tell you things that you might not see from even the best chart. So yeah, I think that's something worth doing, but that is ultimately a board decision, and it would be a new type of decision on this project, because going into the bidding process, there were zero town funds going to this, from parks, general fund, streets, anything. But with the shortfall, maybe there are ways to, maybe there'll be additional pilot funds. Maybe there are additional sales tax funds because we did so well in November, and maybe in December as well. Reallocating 2021 expenses is another possibility. So, when it comes time to actually appropriate town funds to, I think there seems to have been general consensus that we're going to get the bridge and the base bid done, because we've already fabricated the bridge, and as the mayor said, this has been identified as a top priority project for a long time. That's going to get done. But when it comes time to decide what funds do we spend, if any, and from what sources on add-ons, and the east side sidewalk may be one, there may be others that come up. They sometimes do during projects. Yeah, that's something the board can continue to look at as the project goes on. For example, we just did that on the Longs Peak Drive project. As that got going, they hit more rock than they thought they were going to hit, and so it affected the costs on the base project. And so while that project was going on, we looked at the sidewalks and said, what should we do? And looked at the turnaround there and how best to spend the money. And so there's no reason we couldn't do the same on this as well. You're not making a final decision on something like the east side funding just because you're taking steps to get the base bid done. That is the most important part, but the east side thing should be an ongoing focus. And we've done it before in terms of making adjustments and adding things during contracts, and we can look at this the same way, I think.
Good. Anything else? Okay, I think it should be brought forward by the proper means, and the Board of Trustees will make a decision. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Elaine, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to meet everybody. My name is Elaine Alberding, and I'm with Precision Employment. I do outsourced human resource consulting. So just a little bit of background about myself. I've been doing human resources for about 18 years. I started out working for a private law firm. One of the partners at that law firm then became an elected district attorney, and I was a director of HR for the district attorney's office for about 7 years. So I have extensive background both in working with political offices, nonprofits, public sector, private sector. I now work with a lot of municipalities. I started my own business about 2 years ago to do this outsourced work. And I work specifically with municipalities to get you into compliance, get employee handbooks dusted off and job descriptions up to date, all of that type of compliance related stuff, those hidden little challenges that can get you into trouble. So I've revised the employee handbook and I have some suggestions. In a second here, I'm actually going to share my screen, and unfortunately, I will be boring you a little bit because we are going to run through these policies. But I'm going to give you a very high level view of those policies. I want to talk a little bit about why the change may have occurred in a policy, something that may have not been in place before, or just why we have something in place because we need to be compliant and for the legality of it. So some of the policies will really run through quickly, very streamlined. And then some of them I may ask for actual feedback at the end. If there's questions or things that you would want to provide, jot down what policies would be of interest to discuss. I'm happy for you to interrupt me as well, but I just found sometimes the streamlining process, it's best just to jot down what policies you think we should discuss, and then we can chat about those at the end. I'm also here to develop a little bit of the HR structure for you. So I'll be working with Dolores and we'll be getting a lot of the things in check. You have a great HR structure because you have had somebody doing it. So you're not out of compliance or anything concerning there, but I am going to just continue to work with you to get you up to speed and ready for 2022. So before I get started, are there any initial questions that you want to direct towards me or have any feedback about what we're going to look at?
Are there any questions for Elaine? Continue.
Okay. So I am going to share my screen here. So with the handbook, we have to have policies for any municipality. So these policies are going to give you the very specific details of what it is to have a relationship with your employees. You as Board of Trustees, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, all of you are employees of the municipality as well. So one of the things that I want to talk about is how these policies will apply to employees, but they'll also apply to all of you as Board of Trustees and the mayors. So this handbook, this initial important message, and the entire handbook was put in the board packet. Again, I'm just going to streamline this, but this handbook is just talking about how it's not a contract of employment. It's an overview of the policies and expectations of the town, and that we as the town reserve the right to modify, revoke, rescind, suspend, terminate, adjust in any capacity, any of the policies listed. What we always will do is if a policy applies to an employee that we have set a new expectation, we will always tell that employee. So we're always going to revamp policies, revise them, have employees sign off when it's an expectation that's changed on them. But we also have the right to modify or interpret any of these policies. And this right is given to us with this notice that we provide to employees. So it also states that it's employment at will. So we can terminate the relationship for any reason, and so can the employee. This just defines what the Board of Trustees role is, and that is to exercise its authority to manage the town through the town administrator. And then the town administrator is responsible for the day-to-day operations. And so anything to do with employment, with management, all of that falls on the town administrator, and then it's all of your role in order to support her. This is the equal employment opportunity policy, and this really didn't change much. We do have a couple of adjustments right here in the middle. There are the protected classes of age, race, sex, color, religion, national origin, disability, military status, sexual orientation, marital status, creed, ancestry, gender identity, gender expression, and any other status protected by the federal, state, or local law. So the reason we write it that way is because laws may change throughout the year. And so we always want to say, yes, we're going to abide by that. But these are the protected classes that are really important for everybody to know so that we're never discriminating or retaliating against any of them. So then this is our harassment policy. And this just talks about how we're going to strive to maintain a work environment that's free from harassment. And then it goes on to define what harassment is. So we talk about written form, verbal form, physical gestures, nonverbal behavior. This also protects employees from any type of vendors or anybody coming in. So it's not just employee to employee, but it also protects them from anybody from the outside coming in because it's solely around their employment. We added an anti-violence policy. There had been some stated language in there, but with everything going on with the world, we now define it as intimidation, threatening behavior, physical abuse, vandalism, arson, sabotage, or any other act that you as management would deem inappropriate. The reason we do this is we write an anti-violence policy so that we can protect the employees and address anything that's concerning. Same thing with retaliation. We write an anti-retaliation policy so that employees feel they can never be retaliated against, particularly if they ever report anything threatening or any type of harassment or discrimination. We also protect employees in this policy if they assist in a town investigation. So if there's ever a complaint and you have to do a workplace investigation, the anti-retaliation policy protects them so that we don't retaliate or take any type of defense against their job. We also have a complaint procedure. So this just goes to tell us the actual process that you would follow if you had any type of a complaint that was needing to be reported, whether it's a violation of the EEO, whether it's a violation of the EEO, the harassment, violence. We want to protect employees that are reporting this information. So I actually increased the language a little bit around this policy, just so employees know that any type of complaint, and I added the language, a good faith complaint. It's very important so that if an employee is having a frivolous complaint that had no good faith merit, you can actually take action, and that's not retaliating against the employee, just taking action because it was a falsified complaint. And so that just provides us the ability, by strengthening that language, provides you to have a little more ability to hold somebody accountable. We also have a search and inspection policy that just talks about anything that's provided by the town. We have a right to search. This goes into anything back with violence in the workplace, in case someone were to ever bring a firearm onto property. We do have the right to have conversations with people, but if it's something that's issued by town property, we have a right to search. So therefore, we want to legally tell the employees that we have a right to search their property. And the next one is the American with Disabilities Act. This talks about how we're going to make any accommodations for any qualified disability or a religious accommodation. So I know a lot about the ADA, and anytime there's going to be a disability claim in the future, there's specific forms that we'll use. There's a request form that comes from the employee. It's a one-page form that they just make a request of what would make their job easier for the disability or the religious accommodation. And then if it is a disability, we also get a medical certification. Now that is pulled through HR and through Dolores as the town clerk. That information is kept confidential. It's kept separate from a personnel file, but it's important to know that we are documenting those. The reason that it's important for you as the town to know that that protects you. So you can't have an employee who said they discriminated against me for my disability, or they didn't give me an accommodation, because we have a written process. If they want the accommodation, they have to write that accommodation request down and then provide it to us. So there's no loose accommodations being made, which actually protects your liability in the long run. Another one that we list as a policy is pregnancy accommodation. So pregnancy is actually a known disability, and from anything dealing with pregnancy, including after the baby is born, if a mother returns to work, she has an ability to express breast milk. Any of those type of things are protected under pregnancy discrimination. And so if you ever have somebody who's leaving under a maternity process, we would have all the conversations, the appropriate paperwork in place. And then when that employee returned, we would have discussions around anything that's needed for their disability. We also have an immigration law policy. This just states that we are needing everybody to fill out an I-9. The reason we write it down as policy is if they don't fill out an I-9 within 3 days of starting employment, they legally cannot work there. So we want to write that rule down and let your employees know that they can't work here if they haven't been certified. We also define classifications for employment. So for you, a full-time employee is anybody who works 36 or more hours. And a part-time employee is anybody who works less than 36 hours, between 20 and 36 will be getting benefits as well. So with everybody else, full-time employment gets full benefits. In order for us to provide that to employees, we have to write it down as policy. So this just clearly states what a temporary employee is, which is there for a specific period or project or assignment. And the same thing with a volunteer, who's someone who's performing services in just a volunteered unpaid position. One thing we'll always keep an eye on with volunteers is that those volunteers aren't doing a percentage of the job that a regular employee would do, and we're not paying them, because you can get into legality where you're requiring somebody to do work of a paid employee, but you're not paying them. We also have overtime compensation. This policy simply says that if anybody works more than 40 hours in a week, they're going to receive compensatory time. So instead of paid time off or overtime that they're going to be paid out, they get compensatory time, which is just put into a bank, and then they can use it in lieu of paid time off. So we want to write down all the restrictions around it, and that's what this policy states. We also define what our pay periods are, that they begin on Fridays at midnight. They're paid every other Friday. Salary for exempt employment and adjustments to pay. Those are just simple definitions of what we need to state in order for employees to have deductions coming from their wages. We also want to state for performance appraisals that we're doing these on at least an annual basis. And I will work with the town clerk to confirm that there's a process in place. I've got new review forms for the town so that we can, I believe reviews have been taking place, but we'll just make sure that there is a consistent process, a consistent review form moving forward. There's also payroll deductions stated. And one thing that's a change for all of you Board of Trustees and the Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem is that we also are going to require direct deposit. So that may change for a couple of people, including a couple employees. There are ways around being able to put that into a bank account. We can deposit it onto a debit card, certain things. This just streamlines things for the town, and it really did come at my recommendation to do direct deposit. So we can discuss that offline if that impacts anybody. So our work policies, these simply state what the hours of work are going to be, that the town hall is open from 8 to 4:30, that our parks and rec people work from starting at 7:30. And then we also talk about break times. People get 2 10-minute breaks and a 30-minute unpaid lunch. That's just state law. And so we always want to make sure that we're following all the legality. We also talk about the dress code. You don't have a strict dress code for your town, which is fantastic. You just want to make sure that the people who are required to wear town logoed information do, or town logoed clothing. And then the dress code simply states that personal hygiene and attire are important. This is actually important, and I have had to send somebody home because they were the stinky kid. So this is an opportunity that if we have to address any of those concerns, the second paragraph always talks about work attire being neat and appropriate, that if in management's opinion we have to send you home, we will do that. And it's actually going to be on the employee's time, not your work time. So it's just a process, and we will use it because it'll start to raise the bar if you ever have any type of concerns. So attendance and reporting, all hours should be reported accurately and using the right documentation for either the computer or the application. And then we're telling employees they have to show up at their prescribed time, talking about how it's an impact to their coworkers. We also define what on-call and recall pay look like. So those are just important so that employees working in those categories know what to expect. We have our tobacco usage. Now, this is one that didn't really change for the state of Colorado, but I did have to increase the language in the policy because it is within 15 feet of a building entrance. One thing that's also new is that vaping devices, any e-cigarettes, anything like that are now not allowed to be used inside. And so those are some different changes for 2021, actually, but we caught them for this employee handbook. And so we just want to define those for the employees. We also have town closures listed. So the town closure is simply by the town administrator's discretion. And then we define how we will handle it as far as essential personnel or non-essential. And it's again important just to have those definitions so employees know how to address it. We talk about modified duty. So modified duty is also important for all of you to hear about. So if there was ever a time, as I stated in the beginning, you're employees of the town. If there was ever a time you couldn't complete the functions of your job as a Board of Trustee member or the mayor, mayor pro tem, then we would want to have discussions around anything we could do for modified duty. Maybe if hypothetically somebody's injured in an accident, or you have a temporary loss of hearing or something like that, we can make accommodations to be able to provide you a way to still participate, and it's our legal requirement to do so. So the same way that we're telling anybody we would modify duty, as long as it's reasonable for the employer, we have a federal requirement to do so. And so this just states what that looks like and defines that 3 consecutive more days of lost work would actually open you up to modified duty. We then define our paid time off policy. Now this changed for 2022 because paid time off is now, we are now going to cite the Healthy Family Workplace Act. So I will take you on a 2-second boring stroll about COVID times. Initially, the federal government came out with the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That was the act in the first year that said you have to pay everybody up to 2 weeks if they get sick. And then we were able to recover those funds as employers from the government. Then the next year, the federal government said, that's now a town problem or a company problem, and they pushed it onto the state level. The state came up with the Healthy Family Workplace Act. In that, it actually also defined not just for a pandemic or a national disaster, but it also talks about being able to take time off if you have a mental or physical illness, if you have to care for somebody with it, if you've been the victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, if you have to testify in court. So any of those domestic abuse leaves, all of those are now caught with the Healthy Family Workplace Act. So some laws changed in Colorado saying we now have to provide time off where we're protecting someone's job to be able to go if they were, a victim of domestic violence. So the Healthy Family Workplace Act says now we have to pay them. And so what they told us is you have to pay them 1 hour for every 30 hours they work. However, your paid time off policy is already compliant with providing enough. And so we put in there that your paid time off policy is offered or exceeds the paid level requirements of the HFWA. So you are therefore compliant. So you're not going to add any additional sick leave. You're not going to be providing any additional time off. You're already compliant with the Healthy Family Workplace Act by simply doing what you're doing with paid time off already. And what that looks like is the next page. So this is from 0 to 5 years. Now we did adjust these numbers. So these are new numbers that we have come up with, Dolores, Victoria, and I, because it makes sense for your size of organization to be able to retain and really not recruit because you don't have a lot of growth. But if you did have growth, we'd be able to recruit good hires with this type of paid time off. So we always look at that when we're assessing anything, any changes. We always look at, would we be able to retain the people? Are we going to put a negative impact? Is this a positive change? So this was, in fact, somewhat of a positive change in the sense that it looks like we provided more paid time off to employees. They now receive 10 hours per month when they first start. Previously, and I apologize, I believe it's right in front of me, I believe it was 8 hours before. But with this, we also combined the sick leave. So really the town has less of a liability. So the financial liability of what employees may take in a year was less on the books, but we increased an employee's paid time off because we no longer do a separate sick bank. You no longer have to legally. So we decided to get rid of that. By doing one, you know what your books are going to look like. You know that what they are going to accrue each year. And you also know that they're going to max out at 240 hours in a year. So all of those are ways that we can budget and always maintain so that if you had every employee leave, you could still afford it. So those are things we always look at with the purse strings. But the real reason for this that's a nice benefit for your employees is because it looks like you're increasing their paid time off. They can use it for anything. They can use it for any of those things that are protected under the Healthy Family Workplace Act, or they could also use it to take a day off, to go ski, to spend time with family, whatever it is. So the paid time off, we do put restrictions that it can't disrupt normal service, that we have to have pre-approval. We put restrictions on how much time we ask in advance. And then we would not deny somebody who's sick or anything like that. But we also talk about the maximum accrual levels and all of that. So all of this is just the standard language so that we can have a rule that says, here's how you use it, here's what you get. So any questions or input here on the paid time off policy, just because it's in front of us and with the changes?
Are there any questions yet?
Okay.
Continue.
So we also added a PTO donations policy. This is one that I really believe in because coworkers will always provide for their own coworkers, and it's no added liability for you as the town. So we didn't increase budget or have to add any more because if somebody's already earned paid time off, we are allowing them to donate it to a coworker in a catastrophic incident. So a catastrophic incident would probably be defined ultimately by the town clerk who's managing HR. But if she had a question or wasn't quite sure, was too close to the situation because it's a friend that she works with, then she could definitely reach out to me and we could define what that looked like. I don't want definitions in there because it's just more important to say, here's catastrophic. And we always want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. And then as long as we are, we have no legality issues. We also then have the policy just defining holidays. So we state everything that holiday time. We also state that you can't get paid holidays or use it as an end date. So if you're in a leave without pay situation, you wouldn't be paid that time. And it's just important practice to do. So that was also an adjustment from your past policies. For voting time, we just state they have a right to vote. And you also provide a bereavement leave policy. There wasn't any change to it, but I just wanted to put it on your radar. Some municipalities are going to 1 day of bereavement. Some days are going to 5. I feel very comfortable still leaving it at 3. That's typical for most private sector. So if you were to recruit, if we ever had to pull somebody out of a different position, then I think you could easily compare apples to apples with these policies. And really, when we're writing policy, that's what we want to do. We want to retain our current employees, provide them with rules, but the benefit ones are ones that we want to try to get them as much as we can and be comparable to other towns. So then this is our workers' compensation leave. And this just talks about what's going to happen if you get injured. We have a really set practice. The first report of injury is imperative that it gets reported. We have a practice in HR that we will report it within 24 hours. We also state to the employees that they have to go for required medical treatment. The reason for this is that if you had an employee that went and sought their own medical help and they put it under their personal medical and they never filed it with workers' comp, it'll get denied with personal medical when they find out it's a work injury, and it'll get denied with workers' comp because you didn't file it within the allotted amount of time, and workers' comp has a right to refuse that claim. So because we have to write to the employee in a policy and say, if you don't seek required medical treatment, it may not be paid. And that would be a tough conversation with the employee, but it is one I've had to have before, and they had to eat their own medical bill. Very unfortunate, but it's why we write the policy notifying them ahead of time. We also have the jury duty and witness leave, like we talked about with the Healthy Family Workplace Act. This just states that you're going to be under jury duty, paid for a certain way. We also have active duty training. It just talks about anybody who's a member of National Guard or a military reserve is provided with 15 days with or without pay. They can use their own paid time off, but we just protect their job for 15 days in accordance with USERRA. We also have the leave of absence without pay. This just simply states that anything not covered with a paid leave is going to be leave of absence without pay. So we define what that looks like. We also state that we can't have anybody granted with more than 3 months of leave with absence without pay. Anything more than 3 months is a 12-week leave. You would want to separate with that employee. As unfortunate as it is, you could always hire them back, but that is the true definition of 12 weeks, 3 months. That's when you would separate through a medical leave. So we would want to stay consistent with that. And then administrative leave is just at the discretion of the town administrator. So if an employee is placed on leave, say pending a workplace investigation, we may or may not want to pay that leave depending on what that good faith claim looks like. If we're not quite sure it's good faith, we might put the person on paid leave. If it looks like it is very clear, this was a clear violation, we're just working through the process, then you would probably put them on unpaid leave. But this gives the town administrator the right to do so. Medical leave of absence, I touched on. This just talks about how we're going to protect the job for up to 12 weeks. Anything beyond that is just not recommended because it's what the federal law states. And so if you chose to violate your own policy and hold on to an employee because they had maybe a 4-month leave, they were dealing with something, then the town can do so because there's no concerns if you sometimes violate a policy when it's well known and it's discussed. But this just says that we may have to separate with employment, and we would do so with that employee. And then we talk about public contact. So the only people we're just talking about being courteous to citizens, making sure that you always know you're an ambassador of the town. So anytime you're talking about anything, including with a neighbor, anything like that, you are an employee of the town. And so we just want to remind all employees, as well as you as the board. And then outside employment just talks about having any outside employment that's a conflict of interest. We can do quick checks. If anybody has outside employment, they can run that past Dolores. If she has questions, she can run it past me. Solicitation talks about not soliciting anything or distributing while on town property. Also, political activity, we never want to keep an employee from engaging in any political activity, but we are just telling them with this policy that they do it on their own time, with their own resources, and not on town premise. And then we have our computer and IT usage policy. This just talks about reinforcing our resolutions, ensuring our employees use it for the right purposes, and protecting all of our data. So we go through, and I think it's about 2 or 3 pages, probably 2 pages of the handbook is on IT usage. We talk about what they shall and shall not do. It's very important for me to write policies like this. So if we have to write an employee up or unfortunately terminate them, having a policy that's clearly very concise, but says specific examples of what not to do, it just helps combat unemployment claims. And so later on, when you have a claim, the town may not have to pay it, and that saves your rating later, which ultimately saves you money. So we have an email policy as well. The one thing in here that I will make sure and point out with employees is what everyone's probably aware of is that everything's open to Cora. So Cora, just always there that anything can be reviewed or requested. And so we want to make sure that employees know that. Media relations, this talks about how the town mayor and the town administrator are the liaisons for all media inquiries. And unless otherwise approved, nobody should be speaking to the media. We also talk about reporting convictions. This goes for anybody because everybody's employees of the town. Anybody who's convicted of or pleads even a no contest under any criminal drug statute, anything violating this, we would want to know. It does not mean that you would lose your job. It means you've made a report per the policy, and we would want to know that within 5 days. Now, this is if it's a conviction. This isn't if there's allegations or anything like that, but this is reporting convictions. The reason that I added this policy is because if you have files there that you can't have felons around, and so if somebody didn't report it, you might be out of compliance because you aren't able to have certain people around certain programs, files, or whatever. At-will employment is just stated again later on in the handbook so that it's defined a little bit more. Talks just about how we can separate at any point. What I always tell people is that we can terminate you for no reason, the wrong reason, as long as it's not an illegal reason, but we won't. We're always going to give you disciplinary reasons unless it falls into my no kidding, no fooling category. That's if you steal from the company, if you do anything that's in the no kidding, no fooling, you would be immediately terminated. Other than that, we have progressive discipline. So we want people to know they have a wheel in the ditch and we're trying to get them back on the road. So we define what discipline looks like. And then a little bit further in the handbook, we actually define what corrective action is, verbal warnings, if they get to a performance improvement plan. By doing so, that also combats unemployment claims. So if you still file them, then ultimately you're not going to have them paid out because you told somebody what would be happening. But ultimately, it provides the employee a chance to correct their actions. The biggest reason that we put anybody on a write-up is that we want them to correct those actions. So this just defines how we're going to do that. We also added a problem resolution policy that just states that you're going to discuss any issues with the person that was involved or a supervisor, and that discussion is held within 3 to 5 days. The first couple of days, you're still mad. If you're still mad by day 3, go talk to somebody. By day 5, make sure you're talking to someone because otherwise you're putting toxins in the well. And so a lot of this is education to employees that why we write these policies are to create a better culture or to continue to have a good culture. There's a fantastic culture there. So the complaint process just defines what an employee would do if they had a complaint against management. And then we talk about separations. We just define what each looks like. We also go into the medical, dental, and vision insurance, what happens when you separate, what a final paycheck would look like, when we're required to pay you. All of those are just reasons for definitions in a policy or so that we can combat a claim later if someone says we didn't pay them correctly. Safety, it's important to have our safety practices. The employer's goal are to provide a safe workplace, provide safety and health education and training, to review and update workplace safety rules, and to keep accurate and complete records. Our employees' expectations are to report all unsafe conditions, to report work-related injuries, to wear any PPE that's required, and to abide by all of the policies and safety rules. We also have a driving policy, specifically talks about following the law while driving, no texting and driving. It also defines what to do if you're involved in an accident. And there are reasons for staying at the scene, reporting it. If somebody doesn't follow that process, it just opens the door for us to ask follow-up questions, get a little more involved in that. So we write a specific process down so that people will abide by it. We have everything that we need for insurance, but ultimately the driving policy is there so that if we did have to separate or had any concern over driving practices, we have a very strict policy that says exactly what we would expect out of those employees. We also talk about cell phones. The biggest one is no texting while driving, but another part of cell phones is just not to complete personal business while on company time, and to make sure that personal phones, if they're personal cell phones, they're left for that. We define insurance benefits. Important for you to just know, since this is your town, is that part-time employees who work at least 36 hours do get involved in the group benefits, so 36 to 40. And then any of the health, dental, and vision, life insurance, you have really good plans here. Your retirement plan is also incredibly rich. So I think looking at that into 2022, we may make some recommendations going into the 2023 year, but those will be some things that I talk about with Dolores and Victoria. But you do have really good plans for your employees. So I did a review of those, very comparable. So I think you're easy to retain your employees. We talk about our employee drug and alcohol testing. The purpose of it, we define that we do not recognize Colorado's marijuana laws and that it is still illegal under federal law. And then we also talk, you'll see in the handbook, in the full board packet, there's pages that talk about the process for testing, the reasons for testing, the different testing protocols, how we test, why we test, the levels we test at, what a medical review officer is, boring detail for days. But those reason those pages have that there is so everything is defined. If an employee wanted to question a drug test, they have a process. If they want to forward it on to the medical review officer, we already defined what that looks like. So it just puts you in a really good position so that you're already abiding by your policy and your employees know exactly what to expect. The nepotism policy, you had one before. I did increase the language a little bit, but this just talks about not having anybody in an authoritative role over another that has a relationship. And then we define what a relationship looks like in that second paragraph. But really, it's just not being able to supervise those that you might live at home with, go to work with, any of that capacity. Friends are different, but we always just keep that, especially with a small town, just making sure we keep an eye on nepotism. This is direct supervision, not indirect. So if we have a level in between or a layer in between, we have written that that's okay. We also define town property. So we talk about it not being used for personal use. Another thing that we bring up is that town property, if it's damaged or any of that, it's to be informed, or they're to inform management that there's been damage. So that is important, that damage against town property, we can hold an employee accountable, potentially even withhold it against wages to a certain level if you ever chose to. Really, those are more in the reprimand setting. Like if somebody had done something several times, maybe that's a recommendation I would make. But ultimately, this policy gives us the ability to do that if needed. We also define having personnel records, just talks about what Colorado state statute Dolores and I will always manage to make sure that those personnel files, or whoever might manage them in the future, that we would abide by the law. We also talk about having bulletin boards, even though those are a little outdated. We do have to have a place that we inform employees. So usually defining a bulletin board is the easiest. We also talk about a gift ban. So this was one we decided to keep in. Gift ban is typically only for elected, only for appointed, for the town administrator. However, I recommend it because in some municipalities, and I would not say this would happen in yours, you can have people that are receiving any type of a gift especially in excess of $50, for plowing a street for somebody or for doing things. So I've seen it in bigger municipalities. It's a pay for performance and getting a little bit of a perk. So by writing down you have a gift ban, you're just saying no to that practice, but you're telling anybody if it's less than $50, you're welcome to accept that gift. But it just provides a little bit of rein on that. And so I did include that. We also talk about personal business, just defining doing it after hours. And then we state in here that you're supposed to have all the requirements of a CDL if that's something that's required. Then we talk about training and professional certifications. So the town's going to pay for fees and costs for any programs that you go to, things to keep up your certifications. If you go to a conference, those type of things, we're just stating that those are going to be compensated. Oops. And then we talk about whistleblower protection. So the town is committed to having ethical and legal compliant practices. So we tell employees, if you think we've done something wrong, blow the whistle. Tell us, report it, do something. And then we have the last part of the employee handbook is the definitions. So do you have any questions?
Trustee Wong.
Yeah, the moonlighting clause that you mentioned, not being able to have another job. Could you give me some more information on that? That doesn't seem. I guess I think I have concerns about that one, I guess.
So it's just an outside employment policy, and I can go back to it if you want me to pull it up. With that outside employment, all it's simply stating is that you need to disclose that outside employment. So we're not saying you can't have it. Where we would see an issue, and I can pull it up. Where we would see an issue with it is if you had, so here it is. So with the full policy, you can engage in outside employment as long as it's not a conflict of interest. So it's us just doing a check. So it's not saying we would say no, but we would say no if your parks and service person who trims the trees during the day decided to go moonlight at one of the places in town that he should be trimming the trees during the day. So if there is some type of employment that somebody is gathering funds for that has any impact on their job, we want to know about it so we can do a check. Most of the time, we would never say no to anything. I could see where if it was an engagement in something that was, an example would be you would not want one of a police officers for, I know you contract with Boulder sheriffs, but one of my municipalities would not want one of their officers moonlighting at one of their marijuana shops. It just has a poor practice. It looks poor. So that is an area in which we would say, doesn't matter, post-certification, vision to what we want our culture to look like, that would be a no. Another one that might be a no would be the example I gave is if, trying to think in your world, if you had somebody like your planner who was then taking side projects from anybody within the town to help develop things, definite no. So it's really directly relating around a conflict of interest. It's not saying no to secondary employment. It's if it's a direct conflict of interest with the job.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Further questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
I got a comment, I guess, on page 6. Under the town administrator's duty, it says the town administrator determines the budget of the town. That's not right. It's the board. And the next two phrases after that are kind of questionable too, but.
For some reason, she's no longer on the screen.
Oh, no.
Dolores,
You're still connected though.
Can we maybe wait until she reconnects?
It looks like we lost her, Brendan.
I still see her on her name up, but obviously no video or sound, but her name is still up as among the people.
There she is. She's connected.
There she is. Okay.
No, she wasn't on there.
Okay. I must have a delay on my
Elaine,
side.
did you get
Sorry about
Did you get Mayor Pro Tem's questions? Did you hear those?
I did. I heard the one question about the budget and how the town administrator on page 6 does not actually have control over the budget. So I will look at that language. Now, what it looks like, my understanding is, does the town administrator have the ultimate determination over what employees are paid? Or does the board weigh in? Because that's more of what the day-to-day functions of it. But I think strengthening that language is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that last phrase from there on out needs to be rephrased somewhat. And I don't know about determined planning or staffing levels. That's probably, I mean, the budget can determine that partly, but within the allocations, the town administrator also can determine, when to hire somebody and whether you need, if we allocate, I don't know, $200,000 for planning services, the town administrator can determine whether you do that with 5 part-time people and 1 full-time, or, she has discretion within that authorities. Anyway, I just think that language needs some reworking.
Okay, perfect. Absolutely.
And
did you have another suggestion? Because sorry, you had cut off.
I had one other question, and maybe this isn't the right time to raise it, but it's something somebody asked me last weekend and I didn't know the answer to, and it probably maybe along with the town attorney, but it related. But since Board of Trustees members are town employees, on page 10, it says, let me find it. Under immigration law, let's see, all employees must be U.S. citizens or non-citizens who are authorized to work in the United States. If there's someone who's a resident of Lyons who is not a U.S. citizen, would that mean they would have to have a work visa basically to serve on the town board?
Correct. So what this protects you is having anybody who is not certified. If they're not certified, you can't have them working for you. You can't pay them. We've run into a lot of this. COVID has unearthed a lot of this with people stepping out of jobs and needing to step back in them. There's things called TINs. There's a lot of it. They're not valid. Goes back to years ago. They used to hand out Social Security cards like they were candy, and there was not the backup to go with them. So now if we can't certify with both documentation or get the appropriate work visa, then we would have a discussion.
I guess while we're on that, Brandon, is there a U.S. citizenship requirement to be an elected official in Colorado?
Not under state law, there's not, but it's more of an issue of federal law compliance with, payment to illegal immigrants is more of the issue.
What if a non-citizen wanted to run for the town board and could become that employee and refuse compensation?
If they were if they wanted to refuse compensation,
yeah,
it'd be a tough one, because under state law, there's no requirement that you are a U.S. citizen, only that you're a resident for the preceding 12 months in the domicile.
Okay, somebody asked me that question over the weekend, and I didn't know. So, okay.
That is one I think would ultimately go to a town attorney for a legal review, because that's a slippery slope of, would you be able to deny a person the opportunity since they are refusing pay? My take on that would be, you would not allow them to refuse pay, because it would be, so you would have everyone else with pay practices, everyone else on the board being paid, and a refusal of pay would be violating your own pay practices. And so it just, even though it saved a little bit of money for the town, I would say don't violate your policy to get somebody in the back way. Yeah.
I think, the problem is, I think it'd be, I'm surprised it doesn't come up at some point in time. It'd be a great lawsuit, because under state law, there is no such requirement. So hopefully it doesn't happen to us though.
I think they could win in state law, but then ultimately it would get overturned in federal.
We may want to look at that, because I think elected officials should be able to decline pay.
Well, and if you did it as a board, so if you did it for a reason, such as you were declining pay, then you could vote as a board. And if the quorum said yes, then, you would have whoever wanted without pay. The reason I would say it's a slippery slope is if you as the board are allowing them to do not take pay because if they were paid, they'd be violating the law. And so that's where it's like, okay, do we really want them to not get this? Because then all we're doing is letting them violate the law. And so it's just a slippery slope. It's where I'd want a legal review done.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting concept. Yeah, I could see it going either way. And ultimately, I think it would come down to where the board would want it. Legality wise, if a town attorney said that, yeah, you could do it, then I think you could do it with a vote.
Okay.
And to be clear too, if someone was a valid, non-permanent resident of the United States, this would not be an issue. It'd only be if someone was an illegal immigrant to the United States and then run for office, win, and then couldn't accept pay. So once again, hopefully, knock on wood, as town attorney, that's not ever an opinion I'd have the draft, but it certainly would create a conflict between state and federal law for sure.
And Brandon, I apologize. I did not realize you're the town attorney.
Oh,
Nice to
I
meet
am
you.
the town attorney. Yeah, pleasure to meet you.
Apologize for that.
Trustee Watt, did you have a question?
I was just going to add, I mean, if they weren't having pay and they weren't an employee of the town, I would imagine that insurance and other key coverages for the employees would be in jeopardy as well.
Well, I mean, the problem is you can't say just because they're not being paid that necessarily they're not an employee. They're still an employee of the town regardless of whether they're being paid, which is the issue for our insurance coverages, for town policies. It creates a number of issues. So, I mean, once again, hopefully it'll not be something we ever have to deal with, but it's certainly a valid legal issue that's out there. And because we're a statutory town, unfortunately, it's not something we can change either. The requirements for running for elected office. A number of larger municipalities have changed that in their charter or their code, but that's not something we could do as a statutory. So it's kind of surprising it's never come up, and hopefully it never does.
Any further questions? I want to thank you, Elaine. I think it was a very comprehensive presentation, and I think we all appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
We'll take a break until 7 and then I'll come back for our meeting. Thank you, everybody. Your granddaughter's cute, Lowell.
Yeah, we've had her all day, and so she just came down to say goodbye.
Oh, boy.
She's
She
a
is.
pistol. That's the youngest one.
Oh, boy.
Mayor, I'm here. I'm just going to take the last couple bites of dinner.
You go right ahead, son.
Sorry.
It's all right.
I get 60 seconds, 30 seconds, right? This is a fast meeting, right? We can just.
Yep, you're in.
I'll call the Monday, December 20th, 2021, regular Board of Trustees meeting to order. Could you please call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Present.
Trustee Waugh,
President.
Trustee Carabas,
Present.
Trustee Lowell, Trustee Rogan, and Trustee Miller.
Please all rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In Lions, we take a reflective moment of silence. Let's keep in mind the victims of the tornadoes and all the victims of COVID. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Are there any trustees that wish to amend the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Jarvis,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is audience business. This is an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the Board of Trustees on any issue other than future public hearings on the agenda. Is there anybody who wishes to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Help me,
Yes,
help
I
me.
would.
Claudia Keene, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Claudia Keene at 228 Welch Drive, Lyons, Colorado.
Thank you.
I just want to say some words from the Parks and Recs Commission, which we just had a short meeting with this afternoon. We support putting parks funds toward the Safe Routes to School project. If necessary, we would want to make sure that the bridge is the #1 priority for full funding. That said, we would want to see new sidewalk on the east side of 4th Street, north of the bridge eventually, as this is a very popular walkable route. Other funding sources should be pursued first if feasible, but the PRC is willing to see parks money used if needed for the 4th Street sidewalk piece north of the bridge toward Broadway.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Crystal DeCoster, your name and address for the record, please. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, Kathleen Crystal DeCoster. I live at 113 East 5th Avenue in Lyons, Colorado. Board members, town administrator, and mayor of Lyons, this is a quick but hearty thank you on behalf of the Lyons Arts and Humanities Commission, of which I'm presently seated, for continuing to recognize the arts as a key reason people are attracted to and then linger longer in Lyons. By your demonstrated support of the long-running LAHC quarterly town hall and Lyons regional library art shows and their tandem opening receptions, and your recent creative district and public art funding allocations, you are walking your talk about Lyons' dedication level to the wide spectrum of artists who strive to thrive here, which includes painters, photographers, singers, songwriters, musicians, recording engineers, producers, culinary artists, quilters, floral, landscape, and graphic designers, jewelers, ceramicists, crafters, poets, authors, bloggers, arts-related business owners, sculptors, fine woodworkers, and more. On a daily basis at my business, I hear customers aglow with admiration for our quirky little Lyons that dares to showcase the arts all over town, shuns franchises, and widely, vividly celebrates novelty. So many thanks and happy holidays to each of you for your hard work toward making Lions the very best balance it can be for all those who are lucky to live here, conduct business here, as well as for those who visit here. Thank you and have a nice break, you guys.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Madam Clerk?
No, sir, I don't see anyone with their hand raised. Oh, Ian Brighton.
Sorry, I was trying to get my button.
Ian Brighton, your name and address for the record, sir.
I'm Ian Brighton, 322 Evans. I just wanted to echo what Claudia said about the importance of the fully funding sidewalks north of the Ped Bridge. That's the route that I currently take with my son James, and will soon be taking my younger son Michael. Will be starting his first day at kindergarten, which is a big deal for us as a family. And you know, all year we've been dreaming about getting an actual safe route to school. So it's critically important, I think, for the community. It's, you know, I mentioned my kids, but it's not just my kids, it's all the kids who live east of 4th will greatly benefit from having a safe route to school, because if it's only on the west side, we have to cross the road twice. So yeah, I just urge folks to keep supporting that, and I can't wait till it's done, and I can't wait till we see the bridge in place. It's going to be I think, an emotional and very positive event when that happens. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees? Madam Clerk?
No, sir, I don't see anyone else.
All right, we'll move on then. Thank you, everybody. The Boulder County Sheriff's Office report, Sergeant Christ.
All right, good evening, everybody. I have just a few things. First on my list is I have met with the representative from Flock Camera Systems, Andrew Warren. We've discussed out a plan and are moving forward with the 2 cameras that are going to be placed on either side of town. He'll be going through some CDOT authorizations for placement, and we're mapping those out right now. So that's moving forward. Hopefully in a few weeks, we'll have that system set up and operational. It's our annual shift bids for the Sheriff's Department. We will be losing 2 of our day shift deputies up here in Lyons. Deputy Robinson, Gary, will be moving back up to the mountains, and Deputy Cosme Loya has taken an assignment within the department, just with another area with the Sheriff's Office. So we will be rotating out our officers February 25th, and they have all bid. So I know who's going to be on day shift. I just don't know who's going to be up in Lyons. So I'm going to try to get that information out as soon as I can. I have my eye on a couple, one on either side of the week for day shift that I think would be an excellent fit for the town. They both have expressed some interest. So we will see how that falls out. I will have more of a confirmation probably at the next board meeting. I think we'll have that solidified. Crime rate in town has dropped. We are not seeing a significant rise in the crime spree stuff that we had last year. I'm going to believe that the extra patrols and officer presence in town that we've been establishing has hopefully thwarted some would-be crime of opportunity. But I always do want to give my public service announcement. Please lock your cars. Please don't leave them running. Please don't leave the keys in them. A lot of this is crime of opportunity, but we have seen a very low numbers this year as opposed to last. So I'm very, very happy about that. The last thing I would like to do is just give a big shout out to Sam Talent and those members of LEAF that organized the annual food drive and the food box giveaway. It was supposed to occur last Wednesday on the big wind day, and it did get postponed because of the high winds. I know the town took a little bit of damage here and there, and the county definitely took some damage. We spent a lot of time out in the county dealing with some some issues there. But I believe it was rescheduled for Thursday, the following day. And unfortunately, I was unable to be up there to help give out the food baskets. But I believe that Sam had told me there was about 50 or 60 folks that were able to benefit, the annual food drive. So I just like to give a shout out to all those people that were involved. And other than that, I wish everybody happy holidays.
Are there any questions for Sergeant Chris? Trustee Lowell.
Thanks, Mayor. Sergeant Chris, I just have a question on the animal control officer. Is the Sheriff's Department animal control officer under your scheduling, or how does that work? Does the officer come up upon the town's request? Are there regularly scheduled intervals that he or she shows up? I'm just curious about the procedure on that.
Right. So we currently have, I believe, 4 animal control officers on duty or employed. So the town of Lyons contracts with the sheriff's office to pay part of their salary. They're within the county. So they basically will come up to the town of Lyons when they're called. We have within the group, with a supervisor and 3 animal control specialists. We just had 2 of our veteran animal control officers retire, Officer Appleman and Officer Schneider. They had been with the county for 25 plus years, both of them. So we do have 2 new gals that are on board. Generally, the unwritten rule of thumb is they kind of split the county 3 ways, kind of a South Superior area, South, and a central officer, and then a northern officer. So basically, they're just like an officer. They can get scattered. They can get called out. So the town of Lyons does not have a regular animal control officer that stays in town. So generally, they're called up when needed, but they do random patrols when they're up on the north part, and that's their officer discretion time. And I stay pretty in tight with that group because I do like them to be in town as much as possible. So I've requested that they do that.
Just a follow-up question. So if we were to request an animal control officer, let's say at the dog park where there's been a number of issues, could we block a period of like 2 consecutive days to make sure they, cover everybody, like a Friday or a Saturday? I guess that request, I would handle it through the town staff, obviously, but that wouldn't come through you necessarily, would it?
No, that wouldn't come through me necessarily. If the town wants to do something like that, though, that would be very similar to our extra duty assignments, the traffic patrols and the park patrols that we normally run through the summer. That is something that I can kind of spearhead that for you, though, and put the feelers out and see what kind of response we could get on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Further questions for Sergeant Chris? Sergeant Chris, please stay safe, sir, and have a wonderful holiday season for yourself and your family, sir.
Thank you. You all as well.
Thank you, sir. Trustee reports, I'll go across the screen. Trustee Lowell.
I have nothing to report except to say that I had a real eye-opening tour at the CMEX plant at our last meeting there. It's quite the place. Let's just say I wouldn't be too crazy about working there, but I admire the people that do.
Thank you. Trustee Watt.
Just have a short report. The PCDC, met last Monday, and they are following the board's instruction to get some feedback from businesses about the design standards. I'm happy to see that going on. They also talked about the comprehensive plan process, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback as they gather that from local businesses. That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Kiravis.
Not much to report. I was out of town last meeting. Just last week, the UEB was discussing the multiple projects going on, which Aaron will get to in his staff report. And they are re-reviewing all the stormwater studies and drainage plans that the town has had undertaken in the past 5, 6, 7 years, and are starting to look at just the depth of that and what is involved and where we go from in the future with that. And I do believe, like I said, Aaron should touch on this more so, that the high pressure water line for First Avenue looks like it's completed and is, I believe, was getting turned on today. And we'll see what we get from that and from the tests on the hydrants to see how that's working and go to work in the coming weeks, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yes, the Parks and Recreation Commission met on the 13th for their regular monthly meeting. They're going to schedule the Lights Out Lions event that was very successful last year. Dark Sky Night is another way to put that, on August the 12th. And they've gotten an LCF grant to cover part of the cost of that. So they're beginning to plan for that event. At the December 13th meeting, the PRC elected new officers. Very pleased to report that Yelena Hughes has been elected as the new chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and Tom Delker has been elected as the vice chair. At that meeting, the Parks and Recreation Commission also took a vote and unanimously supported the expenditure that the town had, that the board had voted in the prior meeting to do a small dog area within the confines of the existing dog park. So that has the support at the PRC. One of the PRC members has already reported on their special meeting they had this afternoon. So I won't duplicate. Claudia Keene summarized very well what they decided. There's no specific recommendation or proposed use of specific dollar amount of funds at this time. But once the 4th Avenue Bridge and Path project goes forward and some numbers are finalized and the scope of work is determined and stuff, that they did express PRC support for sidewalks on both sides with, potential funding to be discussed later. One other trustee report I would make in a different area is just as a heads up to the rest of the board. I've requested agenda items during January to discuss possibly putting a referendum on the April ballot to basically get a non-binding opinion from the citizens of Lyons on their desire and support for a connecting trail between the town of Lyons and Hall Ranch. This is a matter that's under consideration by the Boulder County Parks and Open Space staff at the moment. The most recent word I had on that from Parks Director Cosgrove was that although the Parks and Open Space staff hope to have their review complete by the end of December, that's probably not going to happen now, and it's probably going to run into January. And the town clerk has indicated that if the board should decide to put a referendum on the ballot, that ballots basically need to be ordered by early February. So it's something we would need to take up during the month of January, if that's something the board chooses to do. And the town attorney has advised that can be done either by ordinance or by resolution. And that's something the board can discuss at a future agenda. But I just wanted to let everybody know that request had been made and to possibly look for something in that regard in January.
Thank you. The SFC met and they decided they will have 2 liaisons to the UEB. They felt that was really important. I informed them of a request to mean for future renewables. It will, of course, be at the discretion of a future board at the time of any availability to negotiate the contract. We received a grant from Boulder County to be applied to expert electrical issue analysis, which again will be in coordination with the UEB. It was a good meeting. They always are. The LAHC met to discuss issues such as town hall use for art sales, which we will discuss later. Preparing the call for projects proposal for use of the depot for LAHC offices and functions, and also use by the Creative District. Also a great meeting. Attended the inaugural concerts at the new auditorium at Lyons Middle Senior High School. A shout out to Director Dr. Karen Gregg and all of the student musicians. I also attended our holiday dinner with members of the commissions and boards. Took great pleasure signing the bonus appreciation checks for each employee that the board generously approved. That's my report. Under boards and commissions, mayoral appointments, I'll appoint Gil Sparks to Park and Recs Commission, which is to be commended since he has been appointed to another commission, but he's ready to go to work on behalf of the town of Lyons. I also take great pleasure in appointing Edward Keene to the Sustainable Futures Commission. And since the LAHC requested that they just have one liaison, I'll assume those responsibilities. But of course, if any other board member wishes to attend those meetings, they're welcome as they're open to the public. Staff reports, financial update.
Good evening. Let me get my presentation queued up here. Let's see. I always have troubles with this, don't I? This evening, we're going to be looking at the November through November for the financials tonight, and we'll start off with the sales tax numbers. The sales tax is still very strong. Right now, we are year to date up approximately 33% from the same time last year, and approximately 39% from our original budget projections. And as you can see, we do have a preliminary number in there for the October sales that were received in December. So that number will change slightly once we get that continue to get the additional revenue in, but that's a pretty good best guess. We do also have the local versus non-local numbers in here for you. I wasn't able to get all the way back to the beginning of the year, but did start with the middle of the year, and then I will continue to report on this every month as the board wishes. For December, the approximate local sales tax was about 53%. And I will note that some of these numbers changed a little bit from prior reports, just because we also receive a state share of a special retail marijuana tax, which really would be considered non-local purposes. So I just recategorized that a little bit, but I will continue to report on that as the board wishes as well. But 53% is, is a pretty good number, I think. The monthly sales tax comparison is just for your reference to see how we look in comparison to prior years. And this slide is indicative of the year-to-date revenues over the year-to-date expenditures through November. So as you can see, we've got all of our revenues exceeding our expenditures in all of the funds. So that's great to see. we will also have some year-end transfers that will occur in the month of December this year. So we'll see that gap close a little bit, but this is, always great to see. And it also does include those summit fee numbers that we received in November. So that was, a really good, a good receipt that kind of closed the gap on some of those enterprise funds as well. So that was great to get that recognized for this year. The revenues for year-to-date versus the year-to-date budget projections through November, we are exceeding the year-to-date budget projections in all of the funds, with the exception of the Stormwater Fund, which is just shy, just a little bit. So we'll continue to watch that one and see what it looks like through the end of December. But a lot of those, can be contributed to sales tax, obviously our strong sales tax, our strong camping, parking revenues, and then of course, summit revenues as well, because those were originally budgeted in the prior year. So year-to-date expenditures, for the most part, they were all lower than what the budget projections are. And again, as we close some of the gap on some of the year-end transfers, we'll see that shrink in a couple funds, specifically the general fund, because we have that transfer to make to the capital streets projects fund that we created. So 300,000 will be transferred to that at the end of the year. And then, I anticipate the water fund gap shrinking up a little bit more as we get in some of those larger capital expenses as well that we're working on with Longs Peak. Year-to-date, these next two slides are just year-to-date revenues in comparison to where we were this time last year. So as you can see, we are exceeding in all funds compared to where we were this time last year. And the same thing for expenses. This compares where we are this year versus this same time last year. A couple of the funds are a little bit higher than we were last year. The general fund is one of those, the electric fund, and then also the Parks and Rec fund as well. Nothing concerning though. So nothing that I was worried about. And then these are just the attorney's fees that were paid through November, about $218,000. With that, I will open it up for any questions if you have any, or if you have any suggestions on things you'd like to see for year end next month. I'm happy to take those suggestions now, or if you want to email those to me, happy to do that.
Any questions for our finance director? Trustee Wah.
Thank you for this report, and thank you again for the tracking of local versus non-local. I think we should celebrate to some extent that we're so far ahead in sales tax. My concern is that this is a little bit of a post-COVID first summer getting out in the world. I know from the hospitality side as well as kind of tourist side, there's been a lot of traffic in Lyons, and I guess part of what I'd like to understand, and I can follow up with you offline as well. I'd like to understand kind of a little bit about the local. I know we can't share who, but maybe categorize where some of those revenues or some of that sales tax revenue is coming from, just so that we have a better picture and planning picture in terms of how and where sales tax is going to come from. I think there are some things that we need to consider in terms of is this a blip? Is this as good as 2020 was bad from the same root cause or not? So just something to think about, and I'd be happy to follow up with you, and maybe we can figure out some ways to just get a better grip on exactly where some of that 33% increase is. I mean, a big dip or a big rise like that, we should understand where it is. And some of it may be organic and some of it may be event-based.
Yeah, I would be happy to look into that further. And I think they do have categories that we can look at. And as long as there are, enough businesses within a category, we can kind of report on some of those. I also would think that it is very interesting to me to see with the businesses that I'm able to tell that they're online revenue sources, in some of, the non-local source. It is interesting to see the increase of those over time as things have shifted and changed in Colorado. But I would be happy to look into that a little bit further and report on that as much as I'm able to.
Any additional questions for our finance director? Can we have our screen back, please, ma'am?
You sure can.
Thank you. No further questions? We'll move on to utility update. Director
Evening,
Kaplan.
Mayor and trustees. So I'll give the latest update since things are changing rapidly and a lot of projects going on in town. We did switch over the First Avenue water to the higher pressure system this evening. Still haven't had a chance to get out and do the test. I did it later on this evening, thinking I'd have more people home, trying to really monitor what's going on there to make sure we don't run into any problems. There are still some homeowners there who were seeing some strange anomalies with new pressure reducing valves they put in their house. So I'm waiting till tomorrow to make sure I don't hear of any issues this evening. But it all went well. They were able to get the road repaved. So we do have the asphalt back down on that little section of a project. We did then have the same company. I don't know if I had mentioned in my last report about the 2 different water breaks. I think over time I'd mentioned we had a valve that broke just north of Town Hall, right over by the parking, by the entrance to the Laverne Johnson Park. That was slightly leaking for a while. And then we had a break in the water line over at 2nd and Evans and Railroad. And so both of those had been repaired a couple weeks ago, getting one of the crews that was in town to be able to repair those on an emergency basis since we were losing the water. But we were able to get the roads repaved and some of the concrete work done also to get that in before winter sets in, if it ever will. But we got some of those things cleaned up. We are now working down at McConnell and 2nd area on the Welch Court. Sorry, we're not actually over in Welch Court, but the sewer line connects into 2nd Avenue. So if you see the construction on 2nd Avenue, that is to work on the sewer line issues that had been discussed before. They're hoping to be finished up, I don't know by the end of the year, but by middle of January, within a month, hopefully less. On Long's Peak, we just finished up today with the water line work. So the water line should all be connected. Again, the sewer line work was done. They are 3/4 of the way up with the electrical conduit, hoping to finish that by the end of the week, and then work on a couple of stormwater lines. So we're hoping if the weather holds out, we can actually get the concrete work and then the asphalt paving in, if weather holds, before the 1st of February. We also have down, if you've seen, there was a crew down at 2nd and Evans and over by the fire station getting some conduit bored into the ground so that we can lower the electric lines that go overhead right there along Railroad Avenue. It actually benefits Longmont, or it helps Longmont's pump station project slightly reduce their costs because we're going to remove some underground line that's in their way right in front of the fire station. And in return, they will underground that entire block of electric line for us. So they get to save some money and we get to get some more line undergrounded in an area that did have quite a few trees right there, if you know that particular block. We have a new backup system at the Eagle Canyon lift station. That's the one just out 36. That was the only lift station that didn't have a secondary backup of electricity. We now have that. Waiting the final inspection and turn on of service, but basically completed. And we have Summit ready to begin. I thought they were going to be starting work, but they may be still doing some finalized plans before they start doing some of the grading over there. And then at some point they will be applying for the permits for blasting, because there will be some extensive blasting that needs to be done, but I've not heard anything on their progress on submitting for those permits yet. One other new project we had come up was with Longmont working on their water line. They discovered our storm sewer that runs along 4th that gets down to Park Drive, right over in the new pedestrian bridge area, is actually, it goes stormwater line, Longmont's water line runs through it, and the stormwater line starts up again. Don't know when or where or how that was ever done, but we now need to figure out what we are going to do to make it right. So I have the engineers looking at that. Don't have a cost estimate yet, but at the next meeting, that will be one for next year. I may have to move around some of the stormwater to get that project taken care of. Then we have everything that was in the report I gave, which was some of the paperwork. So I would let you guys go ahead and ask the questions you might have on some of those.
I have a question. Because it was referenced 3 or 4 times in your report about the LVP lift station. How are you feeling about that?
The Lions Valley Park
Yeah,
lift station.
yeah.
I guess I'd have to go back through the
That
report.
that alarms go off. I think.
Okay,
it was,
right. So that's in maybe Ramey's report. That would be the one we are waiting for them to get parts. That's been something that's been on the plans to get done, just waiting for the funding. But we do have it just under the repairs budget. But they then, once we had these alarms going off, I did go ahead and commit to do the order, and that's included in the 2022 budget. They told me we were at least 2 months out on getting those. So yes, we do need to rebuild the pumps there. And that's what they felt. They did an initial review of them, and they felt that the pumps are not holding and they need to be rebuilt. And that's why we're getting these alarms going off periodically.
Okay, well, my only concern is that's a huge subdivision. And I think that repair should be prioritized to be fixed as quickly as possible. I'd hate for that to break down completely. That would be a mess.
They do. As soon as the parts come in, we will be doing that.
Thank you, Trustee Lowell.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Kaplan, it's no surprise to any of us that they're going to be using dynamite to build Carter Drive. I mean, given the geological difficulty of that site. And I know that the town code spells out that there are such things as posted notices to be put up 48 hours prior. People in proximity, 500 feet, need to get a letter stating there's going to be blasting. But I have some passing familiarity with a procedure called a pre-blast survey, wherein the blasting contractor goes into the homes of houses that are in proximity to the blast site and literally videotapes and photographs the condition of the home prior to any blasting occurring. It's a twofold process because, I mean, it helps the blasting contractor should anybody come and say, hey, you cracked my basement or my drywall. And it also protects the homeowner who has recourse if there's any damage done. I can't find anywhere, I made a quick search on the web today of the Colorado statutes. I can't find much about blasting requirements put forth by the state of Colorado. I'm wondering if you have any knowledge of this device called a pre-blast survey. And if you don't, who could you contact? I mean, the excavating company obviously is going to be subbing this out to a blasting contractor. But I think it's important, especially if there's a fair number of homes that are very close to where that blasting is going to be taking place. And I think they're worthy of having some of this pre-blast survey work done. Would you be able to find out for me if that's going to be a requirement?
I
before they do
can,
that?
I'm sorry.
No, I didn't know whether you would be the person to go to, or Phil Strom, or the engineering people.
Right, so I would think I could look into that as the, I guess, director of buildings, add that into my title too. I do the
Yeah.
building permits currently. I am looking at more than just the utility side. So I could take on looking up more into the blasting permits. I'm not familiar with that. And I did take down a note for the pre-blast survey. I can ask around to some of the engineers and some of the contractors that I know, see what they've had involved, and then try to find out if that's something we can require or request, or
Okay.
how that would fit in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And as a follow-up question, I probably know the answer to this, but so given that they're literally going to be creating that giant cut through the hill to construct Carter Drive, does our contracted engineering person, is that the person who's going to be checking to make sure that the cuts and grades are as they have been planned in the filing aid application?
We have, when we just negotiated with Summit, they were advised to set aside an amount to cover an actual inspector, to do inspector and analysis, materials testing and analysis. So we will have, and it will probably come from our engineering firm. They would be the ones normally responsible, but we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just our engineers needing to do it under their standard town contract, that we had that discussed with them, just like they will be hiring Enline, paying Enline to install the electric. They will have someone doing the materials testing and the inspections. And so we will be inspecting the grade. Some of that does fall on the building inspector, also on the building side, but we need to do it from the public improvement side also.
Okay, thank you, Director Kaplan. And when you find out any information about that pre-blast survey, can you just copy with an email to me, please?
Yes.
Thanks, thank you.
You are welcome.
Any further questions? Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
First, I want to acknowledge something I probably should have said during trustee reports. I meant to, and I forgot, and that is the wind event that we had, not just in Lyons, but in the whole area last Wednesday, I guess it was extraordinary. There were power outages in a lot of places, but I don't know of any significant power outages in the town of Lyons, which I think is a testament to preparedness, both in terms of tree trimming that we've tried to do in recent years, and Utility Director Kaplan already mentioned every time we get a chance to underground electric lines, we're doing it. It's too expensive to do it all at once, but as projects come along, we try to do it where we can. And I think that contributes to more protection from, power lines down in high wind events. And so I just wanted to compliment Utilities Director Kaplan and the town staff and Inline and whoever else was involved for something that didn't happen. We didn't lose power to a large part of lines during some historically high winds. I think that's a great thing. The question I have relates to the annual report letters between the town of Lyons and Longmont about water usage and amount of water shares and so forth. And I just wanted to clarify one thing that's in there. It talks about the town of Lyons will dedicate 1.4 share of Lake McIntosh Reservoir Company water for upsizing the commercial service connection from 3/4 inch to 1 inch pursuant to the terms of the agreement. If I remember right, that's the upsizing that Spirit Hounds did. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
So the town of Lyons right now owns, I believe it's 8 Lake McIntosh shares, I think, that we purchased.
Yes.
And so we're going to put up 1.4 of those with Longmont. And I assume that Spirit Hounds will in turn be putting up 1.4 shares. I'm not really sure how the 0.4 share works, but they will be putting up shares with the town of Lyons to cover our 1.4 shares that may go to Longmont. Is that how it's anticipated to work?
Correct. There was a misunderstanding in the initial discussions with them, but they are aware and working to get the shares of Lake McIntosh.
Okay, so they're searching for those shares now, right? And they're aware
Yes.
of that obligation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
And it might, just to point out in the shares, in case it's helpful, as I did point it out, I think in an email to Longmont and not to the trustees, the shares, we don't always get the shares in the same year. Usually we should be getting shares ahead of time because they're based on building and we get the shares before. But just to be aware, as an example, the new building that's going up at 4170 Ute Highway, the new, it's Agati, right? They had given a share to the town. They had dedicated their share 2019 or maybe even 2018. So we do already have that. And so next year their water will be turned on and we will be dedicating a share to Longmont, but we will not have gotten that share in that same year. So usually we're getting the shares ahead of time and then dedicating them so that they don't always line up, just to point that out when we look at what we receive and what we dedicate to Longmont.
Good point. Thank you.
Any further questions? Trustee Carovas.
Thanks, Aaron, for your report. As always, I like the how in depth and all the projects going on. You keep everything in track and in order, so I appreciate that. Thank you. The wastewater, you had mentioned that CDPHE has come back to us with our re-rating. It put another constraint on it concerning ammonia that we didn't know about prior. This doesn't, I was trying to go through my records from our UEB meetings. This isn't the first time, but every time CDPHE does this to us and you have to spend time on it, we have to go to JVA to redo things. Is that costing us more money every time CDPHE reviews something and then comes back with something else as we go back? Because this has been going on back and forth now for quite some time with these permit levels and the re-rating, and they know about the re-ratings because we've been talking to them for years. How much is this costing us in time and engineering costs of JVA to re-go over numbers just to make sure we're okay?
So JVA so far hasn't had to put in anything additional. There is my time into it and what it takes away. So that's there and a sunk cost. I had 2, maybe 3 discussions with them before the letter came. And in the initial discussions, it sounded like they were just willing to wait, or at least the person I talked to wait for this new general permit to be renewed. And then we would fall under the limits in the renewed permit.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't know if maybe it went up the chain and they didn't feel comfortable just leaving it. They wanted to at least get it down in writing that they've made us aware. One of the options was to go back to JVA and have them redo the study. So they also received the letter from the state. And so I did discuss that initially with them, and they are looking at it currently just on the basis of they produced this report for us. So they want to see exactly what the state is talking about and understand it also. They were not involved in the re-rating. That whole report came out before the re-rating. They were not involved in the conversion to the general permit. They did all of their engineering while we were under our individual permit.
Okay.
So they were going back to look at that, and I haven't followed up yet to see if they've heard anything. And I will find out. We did spend all the money that was budgeted for them back in those years. So if they wanted to come back and we needed to actually revise the report, that might have a cost to it. I would see what they want to say. Again, we're in a position where we were before, this sort of catch-22, waiting for one thing to happen, and then we're okay, right? And just like with the copper limits, we then became okay. So I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm there's another seminar or not a seminar, but a workshop that CDPHE has each month. I try to get on them. They talk about the changes in permits. And so I can follow up with them on where the renewal of the general permit, which would change this limit, where that's at. And hopefully I have some more information at their next meeting.
Okay, thanks. Another question I have on the plant, I think it was Ramey's report, our influent and our BOD loading was down for 2021 compared to 2020, but the effluent was up for 2021 over 2020. Is that normal? So stuff coming in is down, but stuff going out was higher.
Right. I suppose I didn't notice that anomaly. You would think if it's coming in higher, it's also going out higher.
Yeah, just offline, look at it, let me know. See, maybe I missed something, but let's just double check that. And then you had corrected something the last UEB meeting I was at 3 weeks ago, and I reported to the board we were missing about 25 million gallons. You did send me an email within a couple of days that you did find 15 million gallons. Could you explain that real quick to the board?
Yes. So the new meter that had been put into Bone Park that was going to be doing irrigation if we could not use potable water. Again, it's something that's not supposed to be used all the time, but then back when we had the fire and that the runoff was too dirty and it would have damaged the pumps to use from the creek. So we did end up using the meter, and that meter did not get entered into our billing system. So I found that meter was not there and that used 15 million gallons of water. And so now that just got billed to the Parks Fund. So we did find it and have it then that. So we still have some more to check on. It is items like that we have to keep tracking down.
But that drops that 30% loss down to a much lower figure, which is a little more manageable and not as heartbreaking. Then my last question for you is on our accounts payable report. There's an expense for $3,100 for a heater in the pump house. Is that a heater that was new to the plant, or one of the ones that the company that built the plant, Honeywell, did not actually do, as we found out, and that's something we were replacing or repairing on our own?
That the high pressure pump station, that's the water pump, not the wastewater facility.
Thank you.
So that was one that
thanks.
We've had some issues and it had to be repaired before, and it looked to be cheaper to just get this than the long run of continuing to do repairs on those.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. How are those pumps running out there, those three, as we cycle them? I know there was concern with us as a board years ago as with how we overworked them. I know we're doing a lot of oil changes and taking good care of them. They're hanging on.
Right. Yep. I haven't heard of any concerns there with Ramey doing their regular maintenance. We did just, I think I mentioned of 6 months back or so, we had the pressure. It's not really pressure reducing valve there. It's a surge suppressor. So it's a giant tank that sits there. And if there's a big water pressure hammer, it absorbs that. And that hadn't been maintained in a number of years. When we had that done, that inspector also was saying things looked to be really well. That had been holding up pretty good. He was really impressed with that it was still working in the shape it was.
Great.
And one thought on the influent and effluent, I just started to wonder, we'll look at the fact of when we were hauling more waste off, then we would have not had as much going out. So I'll need to look at exactly how it worked, but just something that came to mind of where there might be a difference.
Okay, perfect. Just let me know. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Aaron?
Yes.
We use 21 million gallons of potable water for irrigation.
15
million. And that didn't affect our monthly quota with Longmont?
No, not over the whole season, no. The whole annual year.
Okay. But that's not a monthly a total, it's yearly?
That was since that was from, I believe it was April when we turned on the irrigation
Okay,
through October when we turned it off.
okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll have to rely on the administrator's report that's in the packet. If there are any questions, we can communicate with Administrator Simonson. Her flight was delayed getting home, so she's not able to be here. Legal update, Counselor?
Thank you, Mary Angela. I do have updates on 4 items I wanted to talk to the Board of Trustees about tonight. First, starting with the Honeywell matter. Arbitrators have been appointed as of last week in the Honeywell matter. Once again, that's not really incurring any cost to town. It'll still be a few weeks before the arbitrators are up to speed on the case, and then start the motions for the procedural matter start rolling at that point in time. And of course, we will update the board before any major items happen, which will involve costs to the town. But as of right now, arbitrators have been appointed, which is kind of the first step before the case really starts to start heating up. The next item I want to talk about is the Callahan matter. There was an interview, I think end of not this week, but last week, or not last week, the week following, with Mr. Callahan and town staff. Interesting development is that we learned of other contractors performed work on the property as subs for Mr. Callahan. So that may be coming back to the board very soon for maybe additional action with regard to those subcontractors who performed unpermitted work and work that was not in compliance with the code. And so that may be coming back really soon to the board on what to do next with that. The next item we've been working on is the Yoder show cause issue. The show cause hearing did happen last week. The hearing officer did ask for a proposed order in that case to be drafted by our office, so we're working on that. The hearing officer will then consider the proposed order and then rule on whether a nuisance or not exists. We suspect that once a ruling is made, presumably that a nuisance does exist, that the bank will likely step in and perform a lot of the work that's being required as part of our complaint against the property. Another item that you should be informed on is that Ms. Yoder did perform work on her property, presumably in response to the show cause hearing. However, the work was unpermitted. And so we had to issue a show cause, a stop work order last week to stop the unpermitted work that was being done on her property. And so we have not heard from her since then, but just yet another event in this ongoing saga on the Yoder property. Finally, I want to talk about the L property somewhat that Trustee Lowell in particular is interested in. I did have a conversation finally with Rick Sampson, the town attorney during the 1980s when a lot of the original Lions Valley Park development plan was approved. And Mr. Sampson confirmed that a deed was drafted at that time and given to the town, and he believes it was placed in the safe deposit box that the town had at the bank at the time. However, the deed has not been found in the safety deposit box, unfortunately. So we went ahead and talked to land title to do a title analysis on the property to make sure there wasn't any major issues. If there was, there would probably be some title work that need to be done to clear that up. Luckily, the title report came back with no major problems. That really it's only been transferred one time. And so we're comfortable at this point going ahead and redrafting that deed, which should be inexpensive and simple given the state of the title. And so we expect to have that done fairly soon. And presuming Mr. Bell signs that deed, we can finally, after many, many years, put this item to rest. And so that's good news we've discovered from on that piece. And so that's all I had at this time, I think. So, but if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Counselor? Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item into the record?
Yes, the next item is the first reading of ordinance 1116, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving an amendment to a contract to buy and sell real estate with Lyons Ute Highway LLC for Lot 1, the railroad subdivision.
Staff?
I guess I can take this one on.
Okay.
So this is for the P, I believe, and pull up the agenda. This is for the PUD item, right? Where, as you know, last week, Mr. Tamburello came in to ask for a waiver of the requirement in the buy and sell contract that he submit for a PUD within originally 1 year of purchase and then now 17 months. All this ordinance does is remove that particular section from the buy and sell contract, then renumber accordingly pursuant to the board's direction. And because the contract was originally approved by an ordinance as is required by with our code and state law, the amendment must also be an ordinance. And so that's what we're doing here today on first reading.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councilor? Are there any, let's see, then I'll entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem?
I move the adoption on first reading of ordinance 1116, approving an amendment with a contract to buy and sell real estate with Lyons Ute Highway LLC.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any amendments that any trustees wish to offer at this time? If not, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Carabas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh.
Aye.
Ordinance 1116 passes unanimously on first reading. Madam Clerk, please read the next item into the record.
Item number 2 is the second reading of public hearing of ordinance 1112, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending chapter 16, article 6 of the Lyons Municipal Code, updating commercial and mixed use design standards. There's a side note that this is to be opened and continued to a date certain per the board.
All right. Any further background, Counselor, that needs to be spoken about?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update in the process here. So you may recall from our last meeting that the board requested that public input be gathered on both this item and the next one prior to passage. And staff was unable to arrange that given the holidays prior to this meeting. And so we are requesting that this item, now that has been opened, be continued to, I believe, the 18th, since 17th is a holiday in January, in order for allow that public input session to happen. There's also been requested, numerous changes to this. Obviously can't do those if we're not opening this up for a public hearing. And so this is the same, both items are exactly the same as you saw them on the last on the last agenda, minus some smaller errata items that were fixed in both. And so I think what we would request of staff at this point is for them to be continued to a date certain, which would be January 18th.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion.
Do we have a second?
Continue to the date of January 18th.
Okay, date certain. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second as stated. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh.
Aye.
Trustee Carabas.
Aye.
Ordinance 1112 is continued to a date certain, January 18th. Please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk.
Yes, the next item is the second reading of public hearing on ordinance 1113, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending chapter 16, article 17 of the Lyons Municipal Code, updating the site plan and development plan review process. This also has a note to open and continue to a date certain.
We've been advised by council in regard to the process. Are there any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we continue the second reading of ordinance 1114 to January 18th meeting.
I'll second that.
Can we just do
11:13.
that?
11:13, is it not?
The 18th, Mayor.
No, I'm talking about the ordinance number.
Oh, sorry.
Is it not 11:13? Am I wrong?
I think we did 1113 and this is 1114. All right. Oh, no.
Yeah,
I'm off.
you're off. 11. Yeah,
11.
you're right, Mayor.
It is 1113. That's
All
correct.
right, that's fine. That's fine.
I
That
scrolled
correct-
too far.
that correction is stated for the record. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
your Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Carabas,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell.
Aye.
Ordinance 1113 is also continued to on January 18th for a second reading. I apologize to the Board of Trustees. I participated in 1114 on first reading, and I should not have. It's a marijuana question. It's not complicated. I will recuse myself because my wife has an interest in a marijuana facility. And Mayor Pro Tem, please handle this particular.
Okay, we're dealing with agenda item Roman numeral 9-4.4. And this is an ordinance relating to marijuana centers. And I believe the town attorney has explained this before, but just for the record, for anyone who may not have been present before, if you could, Mr. Dittman, explain what this does.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So when the state of Colorado updated the law so that recreational marijuana was legalized, the town followed with licensing ordinance of its own, basically taking away the distinction between recreational and medical marijuana, creating a single use under the licensing sections of the town code, referred to as a marijuana center. Unfortunately, at that time, the zoning code also was not updated. And so now we have a conflict between the licensing sections of the code that concern marijuana and the zoning sections of concerning marijuana. And so the zoning code must be updated to reflect the new licensing standards, which are for marijuana centers and related uses, and not medical or recreational defined uses with concern to marijuana. And so it's a simple fix, changing, taking out medical and, making those plain old marijuana centers or grow facilities or infused product facilities, as it may be. And that's the simple changes being suggested.
Okay. Any questions of the town attorney from the board? I believe this is a second reading, so I guess it does require a public hearing. So at this time, I would open the public hearing, and we would take any comments from members of the public who wish to speak to this ordinance 1114. Do you see any, Clerk Vasquez?
No, sir, no one's got their hand raised.
Okay. Seeing none, I will declare the public hearing closed. And at this time would entertain a motion with respect to ordinance 1114.
I'll move to approve ordinance 1114 at this time.
Do we have a second?
I'll
A
second.
second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1114. Are there any comments by the board? Hearing none, that I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Carabas,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Please let the record reflect that Mayor Angelo abstained from participation on this agenda item. And with that, we'll pause for a minute and let Mayor Angelo retake the controls.
Thank you, everybody. Madam Clerk, please read the next item into the record.
Yes, item 5 is the second reading of public hearing of ordinance 1115, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending section 18-15-10 of the Lyons Municipal Code, adopting by reference the 2020 National Electric Code as the town of Lyons Electric Code.
Staff?
Mayor, trustees, sorry, let me get my screen switched over. So, right, this was an ordinance that was brought up because in 2020, the state of Colorado adopted the 2020 National Electric Code. And the state code does require that all building departments adopt the latest National Electric Code once the state adopts it. So we are bringing this to update our code to reference the 2020 NEC or National Electric Code. And there were some of the changes that it brings forward listed in that cover memo.
Are there any questions for Director Kaplan? This is the second reading. It's a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing and ask for any comments from the public. If you do have a comment, please state your name and address for the record. Madam Clerk?
Sir, I don't see anyone.
I'll close the public hearing then and ask for any comments from the Board of Trustees. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to pass ordinance 1115 at this time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of ordinance 1115. Further comments? If not, I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Watt,
Aye.
Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Garvis.
Aye.
Ordinance 1115 passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, could you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, item 1 is resolution 2021-132, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 11th Amendment to the Disaster Recovery Services Agreement with OTAC Incorporated, formerly Loris and Associates Incorporated, for capital improvements in drainage design services, Second Avenue Bridge Project. This was continued from the 12-6 Board of Trustees meeting. Number 2 is resolution 2021-133, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the First Amendment to the construction agreement for the Lyons Valley River Park Water Quality Improvement Project, project number LVRP-WQ1 with Eco Resource Solutions Incorporated. Item 3 is resolution 2021-134, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, adopting a new employee handbook applicable to employees of the town of Lyons. Item 4 is resolution 2021-135, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, accepting a $6,000 economic development funding grant from Boulder County. Item 5 is resolution 2021-136, resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving the Second Amendment to the construction agreement with DeFalco Construction Company for the Bone Park Stormwater Improvement Project, Red Hill Gulch. Item 6 is resolution 2021-137, resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a construction agreement with Mountain Constructors Incorporated for 4th Avenue pedestrian bridge, trail connections, and street improvements projects, project 21-4 ABE-PB-05. Item 7 is resolution 2021-138, resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Lyons and the Lyons Fire Protection District for fueling services. Item 8 are the December accounts payable, and item 9 are the December 6, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Are there any items that any trustees wish to remove from the consent agenda? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I'd like to remove item 6 about the 4th Avenue pedestrian bridge.
Okay. Any others by anybody else? If not, we have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda with the exception of item number 6 as stated by the Mayor Pro Tem. I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Travis,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I asked this item be pulled. I am in favor of it and believe it's important to go forward with it, but there are a few aspects of it that I thought should be brought to put on the record in a couple of questions I had of the finance director that we didn't get into in the workshop. I don't think we need to repeat all of the things that occurred in the workshop, but in particular, the financing of the $200,000 approximately shortfall on the base contract amount. Tracy Sanders, the flood recovery director, mentioned that there is a possibility, no guarantee, but only a possibility of perhaps recovering, of getting access to some additional unexpended pilot funds, which if that happens, great, that will go a long way to addressing the problem. But I thought we ought to also discuss a little bit during the regular meeting what the town's internal financing options may be, or if we can't, to the extent we can't find grant sources to cover the shortfall. And I guess there are 3 of them that I'm aware of. There may be more, but I wanted to kind of go with, ask Finance Director Eystone about those kind of one by one. The first would be, as was reflected in the Finance Director's report earlier in the meeting, the sales tax receipts have been very good for 2021. But when we did the budget, we had a projected revenue total at that time that we used when we adopted the budget. And those were based not just on actual receipts through that time, but projected receipts, as I understand it, through the end of the year. And I guess, so question 1 is, given what we've seen since then with the most recent months that have been received, where we have the numbers, are we looking at sales tax receipts in more above the projections that we used when we made the budget? I know we're way ahead of where we budgeted the year, but for what we use for budgeting purposes for 2022, do we potentially have an additional source of funds there coming into the general fund and the parks fund, I suppose?
Yes, that's correct. Because they are split between the parks and the general fund. I feel like we will at least probably see 50,000 more in the general fund than our projection amounts. That's also probably conservative a little bit, but we won't see those come in until after the first of the year, of course.
So the December taxes, which is, I guess, where we close the books for 2021, those would be reportable by the businesses in like January 20th. And then we would actually get at least the number from the state at what point? Early February, something like that?
Yeah, it's usually the 8th of every month. So we would probably know that. We wouldn't necessarily have, well, no, I guess those would be the ones that come from the state would be the ones that we would could accrue back. So that's correct.
Okay. So sometime in February, by the middle of the month, we should have a good idea what that source of funding might be in terms of an amount. That's one possibility. The second possibility is something we talked about before during the budget process, which is after calendar year 2021 closes, there will be some categories within the general fund that we don't expend all of the appropriated funds for, and there'll be some categories that we may spend more than was projected. What's the timetable for totaling those up? I mean, I know when somebody supplies goods or services to the town in December, they may not send the town a bill until January. And we may not pay it till February or later. So what are we looking at time-wise for determining if there's an additional amount of money that could be reallocated from unexpended amounts in 2021?
Great question. I think probably, so we could receive some invoices in January, which we wouldn't necessarily pay until February. So I would definitely say it's probably pretty close to the same timeline as the sales tax revenue numbers are looking. I'd have to typically see, you don't want to hang on and continue, because sometimes you do still get invoices from 2021 later into 2022, but at some point you just have to draw that line and cut it off. But typically, in my experience, it's usually late January when you're finally finalizing some of that kind of stuff up. Okay. But if they don't, if we don't, let's say we get some in late January, we don't bring them till the first meeting in February for the payables, those checks wouldn't get cut until after that first meeting in February. Okay.
And then kind of the third aspect I wanted to kind of focus on was, I think, if I understand it, it's the staff's recommendation that for purposes of having enough money available to allocate to cover the base contract for the 4th Avenue project, which is roughly a $200,000 shortfall. That for at least for now, we would go ahead and either by resolution or if that's what's required. The recommendation was to use the set aside funds for potential flood clawbacks to cover that, so we know that we've got a budgeted amount. But if these other sources of revenue should come in, possibly some additional grant money, possibly sales tax above projections, possibly reallocation of unspent funds from the 2021 budget, would we or the future or the next board then later in the year be able to reallocate those to replenish any funds that had to be used out of the clawback set aside?
Yes, and that would be my recommendation as well. And it really could end up with the timing. By the time we had to, spend that extra $200,000, we may not have even utilized any of that clawback money. We may then have a resolution, have the 2021 numbers in, have maybe a potential grant source, so that really you're not even having to utilize that. Because what it is that amount, that clawback amount, is essentially sitting in a fund balance. And so we would have to allocate that fund balance to be used for the project, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the source that we're going to use. So if we were to get some grant funds in, or we recognize that, 2021 came in, a lot better than we had projected, we can definitely reallocate those and choose not to use the set aside and just keep it where it is. But I think for purposes of, awarding, at least knowing that we have that extra $200,000, and for now, worst case scenario, we're going to use that money that's sitting in fund balance. We have that option should the board choose to do that.
And I guess some of that timing depends on when the contractors get started and when they send us the bills as to when we'd actually have to pay that money, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Those are my questions. I just kind of wanted to highlight those points in part to make sure the members of the public knew that if we approve this item, we're not just got our fingers crossed that we'll find $200,000 somewhere, that we do have some ways to finance this that we hope will not even require using a substantial part of the flood recovery set aside. It's not just, we're not just speculating here. So those are my questions. Those are really the reason I put in. I see Flood Director Sanders here, and she made some good presentations earlier. And I guess, Mayor, if it'd be okay, maybe if she has anything she wants to add on those respects, I'd certainly welcome her input.
Do you have anything to add, Tracy? You're muted. You're muted.
Still not working.
No?
Not
Does,
working.
does this resolution satisfy the situation that we discussed this afternoon? Do you feel comfortable that we can proceed as planned? And that if we do have to appropriate additional monies, Counselor, that an additional resolution will have to come forward?
Yeah, if we need to appropriate additional funds, we probably need additional resolution, yes.
Okay, all right. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move the adoption of resolution, should we get the number right, 2021-137, awarding and approving a construction agreement with Mountain Constructors, Inc. for 4th Avenue pedestrian bridge and connecting safe routes to school project.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Law,
Aye.
Trustee Careless.
Aye.
Resolution 2021-137 passes unanimously. Congratulations, Tracy. Let's get the show on the road. Thank you. Let's see, general business. I don't know without Administrator Simonson if there's any staff report in regard to extending the Boulder County CEMEX IGA. Is there any, I don't think there are any staff members here that could address this issue. I see that Victoria's iPhone is on. Does she have access to the meeting? I wonder. I see that she's muted. I don't know where she is. Would the board like to move this discussion to the next meeting? Since we really don't have the capability of going into depth in regard to the IGA, Mayor Pro Tem?
I think that's appropriate. As I read the cover memo, the existing IGA would expire if not extended in May of this year. So I don't think it's something between now and the next meeting that would make any there be any deadlines that pass. So I think that's the proper thing to do is postpone this to the next meeting if that's.
Okay, Council, you had something to say?
Nothing to say. I was just going to suggest the same thing. So
Okay. All right.
Mayor,
Yes.
Victoria.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I'm still in transportation, but I'm trying to listen on my phone. This item is actually at the request of the county. We were starting to schedule our negotiations to try to negotiate new contracts by April. When they found out that our comp plan had been set back by a year, they had assumed we had had gone through our comp plan, not knowing that the pandemic pushed it back a couple years. So they just said they are not comfortable with entering into a long-term agreement before we really have the input from our community on a development plan for the surrounding area. So this action would basically just extend the current contracts by 1 year or whatever time period we want to suggest to them. And they said that if there's anything within those contracts that would come up over the next year, we could just take up that one issue at the time. So in my eyes, I'm actually quite comfortable with doing the extension. The agreement has worked for us for the past 10 years, and they are open to bringing up a single topic if we need to in between.
Thank you for the clarification, Administrator Simonson. In light of the administrator's comments, is the board agreeable to extending the Boulder County CEMEX IGA? If so, I'll call for a vote. If
I have a question. What do we need to extend it? Will we enter into an amendment or extension agreement, or just do it by vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Resolution
if
approving
the
IGA.
board was willing to consider it, they said that they would draft a interim agreement to extend it. So I would bring it back by resolution.
So I'll call for the vote of the Board of Trustees on extending the IGA with Boulder County. Madam Clerk, call for the vote.
I don't, can I clarify? It wouldn't extend the IGA. It would just be direction to bring back a resolution to do the same.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's fine. As stated by council.
Sorry, I just wanted to be clear for the record.
That's okay. That's fine. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Watt,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Okay, we'll wait for their paperwork to get back to us and hopefully pass it. Next, please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk.
The next item is discussion direction on LAHC art shows in Town Hall and mural on Town Hall.
Okay. I don't know where to start this discussion. I guess I'll start. At my first meeting with the LAHC as their liaison, I suggested that the use of town hall for the sale of art strictly was all year long, was not something that I was in favor of. I've spent 10 years in this chamber, and some of the most important legislation that we've ever passed has taken place. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be exhibitions. For instance, if the LAHC and the Creative District were to win the award of the use of the depot and had art classes, intergenerational art classes, that we couldn't have an exhibition of the art that was created from a cross section of all the people in Lyons. I don't think that many members of the LAHC agreed with that. And I'll leave it at that. Then I have a little bit of a difficult time with a mural on the entrance to the council chambers as well. I think that stucco is an incredibly difficult medium to paint on. We have 2 doors and 3 windows on this particular wall. So I have a difficult time imagining how those could be incorporated into a design, but I'm certainly open to any suggestions somebody may have. But again, it boils down to me to the concept that there were measurements being taken outside. As I walked outside, this issue was never brought before the Board of Trustees. There were postings online and suggestions that this was the mural that was going to be painted on the entrance to the council chambers without any discussion with the Board of Trustees. So again, I think that what's happening is, and we're going to have a meeting on this very shortly, is we're going to have to discuss the roles and the procedures in regard and responsibilities in regard to commissions and boards and their relationship to the Board of Trustees. I'll let anybody else discuss it if they wish, but that's my position. At that very same meeting, right after the stark silence, after I had expressed myself, the idea came up to utilize the depot as a center for the creative district and offices for the LAHC, which personally I support, but we'll see how the applications, the call for projects come in, and the decision that the Board of Trustees makes in that regard. Are there any other comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, we really have two issues here, and I'm not sure how closely they are related. The one as to use of town hall for the art shows, I personally don't have any problem with it. It's been done for many years, ever since I moved to Lyons, and I've been to quite a few of them, and I think they're enjoyed not just by the artist and people connected with the town, but I think a lot of the community enjoys them too. And I think it's not just a matter of supporting the artist, which is a good thing to do because Lyons does need to support its artists. But I also think by kind of elevating the profile of the artist community in town, and there's a benefit to the whole town from this that I see. Perhaps you mentioned like using it as an art sale location year round. Perhaps there should be some more definite guidelines or limits put in place of once you have the art show, and maybe you only leave the items hanging there for a certain number of days, so that it's not permanent. But in terms of just the basic question of whether town hall should be usable for art shows, I've never seen problems with those, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed them. So I'm in favor of continuing that. And if there needs to be a time limit on how long the things stay hanging, I don't know. There may have been some guidelines on that before. I'm unaware. I always enjoyed it, frankly, when I'd come into, back in the old days when we used to have meetings in town hall, when you come into the meetings and there'd be new artwork hanging. And, oh, this is cool stuff. So I kind of thought it added to the attractiveness of the place. And as to the second issue, this has been brought up in passing a couple of times. I do think, and I think as I understand it, the LAHC is working on has a draft set of kind of protocols that they intend to bring to the board at some point about how major art projects are approved, or that they would, before spending significant sums of town money, and that you'd have to define what that was, they would at least notify the board that it was going to happen. And if the board had any problem with that, the board could, any board member could object, request an agenda item, something like that. I think those are in the draft stages, or maybe pretty close to be finalized. And so the point is well taken, I believe, that before a big art project like a mural on town hall, that's a fairly significant expense item, gets done, I think it's appropriate that the board at least be informed about the details and have some input on it. Obviously, for any expenditure of town funds, if a majority of the board at some point thinks, no, this isn't the best way to expend town funds, it doesn't happen. But on this particular how much should be spent on the mural and that type of thing, I would like to see a detailed cost breakdown of how much is this mural going to cost overall how much of it's going to be paid from grant funds or donations, how much of it's going to come from the annual appropriation that we make as part of the budget to the LAHC, which again, subject to board review, is pretty much the LAHC's within their territory, within their charge to make recommendations on how that's going to be spent. You know, sometimes the artists contribute things, sometimes there's specific donations for particular projects that citizens in town like. And what I would like to see happen on that is the LAHC in the boards and commissions portion of our agenda come before the board, and whenever we can work them in January, February, and present to us, you know, who would do the mural, how much would it cost, how long do they anticipate it would stay up, how much tax money is going into it, because that's kind of my thing on it. If we're going to spend, I'm picking numbers out of thin air. If we're going to spend $15,000 of taxpayer money on this, I may have a problem with it. If we're going to spend $4,000 out of the LAHC's annual appropriation and the rest of it is coming from other sources, I'm probably okay with it. But without knowing those numbers now, which I don't, I'm not really, I'm reluctant to vote thumbs up or thumbs down on a project that I don't have the details on. So my suggestion would be, let's put that on a future agenda under boards and commissions and have the LHC come in and make a presentation to us on all those details, how it's going to be financed and how long it would be, how long it would last and that type of thing. That's where I sit on both of those things.
Any other comments? Go ahead, sir.
As I see also as two separate issues, as the art shows, what else I'm 50-50 on the art shows here in Town Hall. I would prefer to see them in the depot building as staff is dwindling down. We get that switch over made if that's what the board and staff want to truly do. The chambers could be used for showing the history of Lions, where we've come from, what we're working on in pictures. So when we have guests and engineers, architects, or any guests, and hopefully the people of Lions coming to Town Hall again someday in the future. As wise people long before any of us have stated that a country, now I'll change the words a little bit, to a town, a person, a family that does not know your history, you have no future. So many people are moving into Lions. The mural behind the mayor now indicates where Lions came from. What was here way back then? What flood damage did occur in 2013? And what do the parks in the park town look like now? Those are strong statements that the visitors and the people we bring into Lions into Town Hall, I believe that's, like I said, my personal opinion, should see, including the floods that occurred. I believe, I don't want to call the mayor old. He's just a little older than I am, but 67, 66, I can't remember the dates. The other, those pictures, those kind of things. But on the other hand, as is previously stated, I've been sitting in these chambers for almost 6 years now. I've seen the art as it changes. It's nice to see. It's the only place we have to show it all and do something for our local artists or Colorado artists. So like I said, 50-50. I'd rather see a little more town history. But if that's the way we go, I would like to make sure we get the depot or someplace else for the art sales for the artists, so that what's being done here in Town Hall can continue. Now, as the second issue, the Town Hall mural, a dollar's conservative figure or conservative economics guy, I'd rather see exactly where the money's coming from. Again, like the Mayor Pro Tem indicated, tax dollars, $16,000 plus what's going to be the upkeep, what's going to be the protections, should it be vandalized, who's paying for it, who's paying for the cleanup. That stuff I'd like to see in the bank. Projects I've worked on different boards, not-for-profits, this or that. The best projects, the best things are done when there's money in the bank, you know exactly where it's coming from, and everyone knows, and there's no questions after the fact. The dollar figures we've heard so far, is that just for the mural? Does that cover any cost to put graffiti coatings over it that we have in the parks now in some places? the cost of cleanup, cost of protection, and depending, I believe it was Pro Tem Browning, he indicated what the actual art is going to be, because for some reason, these past 2-3 years of everyone seems to want to spend so much time looking at something, find something wrong. I'd hate to see us get a future board in a situation where someone says, you know what, I moved to town, I'm offended by that, remove it and cause us a problem. 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't even thought of that. But now, because what we see on a daily basis almost, I would have a slight concern of that. So that is where I stand at this time.
Trustee Lowell?
Yeah, I tend to agree on the mural. I think we need more information on it. I mean, I believe those utility boxes, the paintings on those were, the artist was paid like $1,500. So I don't know what a much larger mural would cost. So we need more information on that. As to the art in the town hall, well, I always use, I'm a bit of a pilgrim on this because I used to, when I would come into town hall chambers there for ecology board meetings or to attend a board meeting, I'd see all this wonderful art on the wall. I'd see prices affixed to some of it. And I'm going, who comes in to look at this? Is this open all the time so that the work of these artists that's on display can be viewed by the general public? So it looks like, my opinion would be, you need an alternative venue. And I think the depot fits that bill very nicely. I do recall a couple months ago, though, I think Kim Mitchell was going to put out an RFP to local businesses about their interest in doing something different with the depot. So this, I guess if those don't work out, this would be a pivot to the LAHC and letting them have the building. That's still kind of up in the air, but so I need more information on the mural, the cost, et cetera, the content of it. And I think the art show, the so-called art show in town hall, is probably better put in a more public venue where more people can take advantage of it.
Any further comments? Trustee Watt?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said about the mural. We just don't have enough information to really make a recommendation about that. I think in general, I'm in favor of a mural, but definitely need a little bit more information. In terms of the art show and so forth, I think it's a good way for us to decorate and support our artists. Let's put our money where our mouth is. I know there's not a lot of traffic in there right now, but hopefully sometime in the future, we'll actually have meetings there, and maybe that's a reason for people to come to the meetings. It's an inexpensive way rather than purchasing art that will get stale and need to be replaced. I think it's a good way to go. I think it's happened over the years. I think there's been some issues with some of the art displays. For some of you that might remember, my wife was involved in one of those. But I think it's one of the things that makes the town unique and makes town hall unique. And I'd like to see the art shows continue personally. And I have no issue with selling the art. Again, if we're going to support the artists, let's help them have a venue. And if we want to do it in town hall in the meeting space, great. If we want to do it in the depot as well, awesome. If we want to do it in the library, great. Wherever we can hang local art and maybe get some people to buy it, that would be fantastic. Of course, they can always go to Western Stars or some of the other great businesses in town that sell that art. But I guess I'm just in favor of it because it doesn't cost us a whole lot to hang art and change up things. And I like some of the themed exhibitions that they've had in the past. So I would be in favor of the art shows wherever and however we can support them as a town government.
Okay. Then we'll need further information on the mural. And I think I got a sense from the board that the art shows in the council chambers will continue. Although I did want to have some of the projects that we're working on drawn up. I guess we'll place those somewhere else in town hall. I mean, we have a Broadway project, we have a trail project, you know, we have some substantial development projects, but I think I got a sense of the Board of Trustees that using town hall for art sales is acceptable, and I'll accept the board's direction on that. Okay. Discussion of future agenda items. Is there any future agenda items that the Board of Trustees would like to address?
None other
Mayor
than what I mentioned earlier, and that's, I think, January, about a possible citizens referendum, so.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Nothing else? If anybody thinks of anything, all they have to do is let Administrator Simonson or myself know. Summary of action items, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I've got one. Sergeant Chris is to look into additional animal patrol shifts. Aaron is to look into a pre-blast survey. Aaron's also to review Ramey's effluent report numbers. Staff is to work with the county to draft the IGA extension. The board is requesting a detailed cost breakdown for the mural. And last, I have art shoulder to continue at Town Hall Council chambers.
Okay.
Did I miss anything, Attorney Dittman?
Council?
Not really. I mean, I think I have a few comeback items on the two ordinances, but other than that, I think we're good.
Okay. Let's see. If that's it, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Carabas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Watt.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Stay healthy, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Holidays.